Well, good morning, everyone. My name is David Hawkins. I'm a partner here at Norton Fulbright. And on behalf of the firm, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you all here today for the Coastal Powerhouse Day and for the keynote speech by Amanda Soloway MP. It's particularly pleasing to be able to welcome you all, so many of you, in person, particularly on such a lovely morning. It wasn't nearly so nice on Tuesday, which has been a slightly different experience. However, for all the benefits of being able to interact in 3D rather than 2D, and for being able to get a coffee and some food to have with the event, it does mean for the first time in about 18 months, I have to remind people in the room to either switch off their phones or put them on mute. And just to let people know that there are no planned fire alarms, so if you do hear the alarm, please do take the instructions seriously. And as a firm, Norton Fulbright has a long history as being a shipping practice, dating back to the 1800s, and shipping remains a key focus of the firm as part of our transport headlight. For my own part, I've been lucky enough to be involved with the DP World London Gateway project for the last 15 years. And I can vividly remember my first trip down to the site, which at that stage was a largely unused brownfield site, with what appeared to be tumbleweed blowing across the site from a strong breeze coming off the Thames. And over the last 15 years, we've been involved with many different aspects of the port, including the reclamation of land from the Thames to facilitate the construction of the port, and the upgrading of the Thames Haven branch line to enable the rail access to the site. Now, when you go down, there's a thriving port and logistics park that's created hundreds of jobs at the port and supports many more jobs within the local community. Having seen that firsthand, I was very pleased that we were able to host today's event because we can see the impact of a strong maritime economy on the local community. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to hand over to Tim Morris, the Chief Executive of the UK Major Ports Group, to provide some opening remarks and introduction to the event. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, Norton Rose, for hosting us. As David said, my name is Tim Morris. My day job is running a trade association for large port operators, the UK Major Ports Group. But I have clearly picked the lucky ticket today, and I'm here as just one representative of maritime industries, here to launch the Coastal Communities Manifesto. And I'm very, very pleased and indeed proud to do so. I believe it's a document that sets out why coastal communities and the industries that work in them are so important. It talks about the opportunities, but also the challenges that face those communities. And it also outlines some very practical steps that we believe government can take to unlock more investment by industry, the kind of investment that David was talking about. Investment that will drive jobs and prosperity and be an important conduit to a more globally connected and sustainable UK. So I'm going to do a bit of Chris Whitty-esque. Next slide, please. So you'll have to bear with me for that. So let's start with the fundamentals. The UK is an island nation, or a collection of nations on two main islands, if you prefer. The sea is by far our largest gateway for trade with the world. 95% of all goods that enter or leave the UK do so by sea, and you'll forgive me if I mention that is via our ports as well. But the maritime story is not just about trade. Established industries like tourism and fishing still have important roles to play. The coast, and by the way, when I say the coast, I actually mean the coast and estuary communities as well, is a great place for manufacturing industries, a great place for technology innovators and service providers as well. And it is also essential to some of the absolutely crucial industries for the future of the UK and for our zero emissions future. Offshore wind is obviously the most prominent example. In the future, it will be a centre for hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and a whole host of new alternative zero emissions vectors. And looking beyond the economy, the coast is a wonderful source and vital source of natural capital for the UK. It is home to a huge range of species and habitats. It is often a place of beauty and a source of enjoyment and well-being for many people. And crucially, it is also home to passionate people, passionate about the potential of the places where they live and making them a success. And you will see some absolutely fantastic examples of that in the films coming up from our regional organisations. And I defy you not to be encouraged and impressed about the activity that is going on. Next slide, please. But almost scandalously for an island nation, our coastal regions and the communities within them can suffer very significant socio-economic challenges. Of course, this is not the case everywhere, but coastal areas on average perform notably worse than UK averages on indicators such as multiple deprivation, unemployment and wages. Analysed on a fine scale, on a sort of small community scale, they cluster in the lower income categories across England, as reflected in the chart on the top left of this slide. When I was producing this slide, I hadn't realised it was a small screen on a long room, so I think you'll have to trust me on that. And this year's report from the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty himself, outlined at some length that coastal communities suffer significant health challenges as well. The map on the lower part of this graph shows levels of coronary heart disease across the UK, with the redder areas being areas of higher prevalence. What's particularly notable, at least in my mind, about this graph is that, or this map, is that the red you see on this chart is all around the coast. This is not a north versus south thing, it's not an east versus west thing. It's a common problem across a lot of coastal communities all around the UK. And by the way, you'd see a similar picture if you were mapping income per head, for example, as well. But looking at international comparisons and thinking about some of the examples you will see on some of the films coming up, it doesn't have to be this way. It's not inevitable that the coast has to be suffer these issues. So we would make the case, both as industry and as people who operate in these communities, that there is a real job to do in levelling up the coast as a region in its own right, but huge opportunities to do so as well. Next slide, please. So now for some good news. In the maritime sector, the UK has a range of industries ready and willing and well placed literally in order to play a role in such levelling up. The maritime sector makes a huge contribution today. Over 1 million jobs directly employed or in supply chains, and good jobs as well, significantly more productive than UK averages and significantly better paid than local and indeed national wage levels. Hundreds of millions of pounds of business investment each year, as David mentioned, with another £300 million yet announced yesterday for London Gateway, a story that you will see across the UK. And a strong commitment to skills, sustainability and a sense of place. But these impacts are more than economic. A survey of young people in coastal communities released today by Maritime UK shows that whilst nearly half of the 18 to 24-year-olds asked said they were planning to leave their coastal homes, the vast majority, 70%, which is the large blue column on the graph, were more likely to stay if there were the right jobs locally. So more good jobs are crucial for the future of the coastal communities themselves. The maritime sector is ambitious to further grow its role in making this happen. Next slide, please, Simon. But to realise this potential, business needs to work in partnership with a range of stakeholders, both local and national. As businesses, we've been really pleased to work with the Coastal Special Interest Group of the Local Government Association to put together the manifesto. It's a manifesto of tangible actions from government that can unlock more business investment and therefore more job creation and more prosperity, and do so in a truly sustainable way. There's a lot more detail in the manifesto itself, which if it's not online now, I'm assured will shortly be so. And I very much urge you to take a look at what we're proposing, but to highlight the 3 of the key themes. The first one being, it is absolutely critical that when we're thinking about boosting investment, we are doing so in a way that is not only economically sustainable, but environmentally sustainable also, and helps to accelerate and deepen the net zero transition. So improving the energy infrastructure, electricity networks right now, vectors such as hydrogen in the future, are key enablers for everyone in our coastal communities, not just the businesses themselves to invest and prosper. Government co-investing alongside industry in new assets and technology is essential to bridge the viability gap of zero-emission solutions, bringing established technologies on board, but also some of the new innovations we saw included in the government's exciting announcement yesterday of the outcome of its Clean Maritime Demonstration competition. And finally, remembering that sustainability is not just about emissions, but about the broader recovery of nature. So action is required on climate change adaptation and realistic natural capital rules and incentives that maximise the potential for businesses to play a positive role. Turning more directly to improvements that can stimulate more job creation, the rules about planning and development should be looked at again for coastal communities, recognising the special needs but also the opportunities that exist around the coast, whilst of course still upholding the right standards and the right levels of accountability and responsibility. Action is required to address the educational attainment gaps that we see in coastal areas and improve the skills funding mechanisms that support further education and development for all those already in or between work. And it's something that I know that the Minister is passionate about, having just discussed it now in a different context. And specifically, government could do more to realise the prosperity dividend of the offshore green revolution for the UK by putting more emphasis on the delivery of UK value targets, giving more clarity on long-term project pipelines, and topping up onshore infrastructure developments that support the offshore revolution by businesses to give them more growth capacity, future-proofing those infrastructure investments that the private sector itself is very keen and motivated to provide. And then finally, our coastal regions need to be better connected. Better roads and rail links and more services to them benefit businesses, but also the individuals within communities alike. And it's not just physical connectivity. It's also the digital connectivity required for modern, innovative businesses, maritime and otherwise, and to enable the new world of work that is becoming increasingly familiar, whether for better or worse, for all of us. So, to close with our final slide, please. The coast is vital to the UK. It has great potential, but it also has challenges and specific to the coast, but present all around the coast of the UK. The maritime sector makes a big contribution today, but it is ambitious to increase its contribution. And this is not philanthropy, it is enlightened self-interest. Healthy communities, successful communities, and healthy and successful businesses are very much interlinked. Industry wants to work with government and other stakeholders to unlock the investment that drives prosperity and job creation. But for us all, a stronger coastal powerhouse drives faster green transition for the UK, more jobs, prosperity and opportunity in the coastal communities themselves, but also for the whole economy, better capability for the UK to trade with the world. I commend the manifesto to you and hope that you enjoy the rest of your morning. And now, I will hand over to our keynote speaker. We are absolutely delighted that Amanda Soloway, MP, Minister of Science, has found the time to join us and give us some remarks. Minister, please.
Well, thank you, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And as you pointed out to me when I walked in, yes, there is a reshuffle going on. So who knows whether I will still be the Minister of Science, but it is great and genuinely really fantastic to be here today as the Minister for Science. And it's also really good to be back having these physical meetings as well, and these face-to-face meetings. So, some feedback. And I think it's really important that we do have the opportunity to do this, but to also join these discussions and to join coastal communities discussions is particularly important. And it is also great to be part of the wider London International Shipping Week, which is, of course, an integral part, as we all know, of the UK business development calendar. I hardly need to remind anybody here in the audience of the strategic importance of the maritime sector to our economy. And today, 95% of the UK global trade is by sea. And the maritime sector provides around a massive 220,000 jobs, which is really fantastic. And meanwhile, ship and boat building, repair and maintenance alone contributed £2.6 billion in value added to the UK economy and accounted for around 44,000 jobs in 2019. So marine and maritime businesses are the nucleus of many of our coastal communities, providing employment and opportunities for local people. And this government has been really clear about that in terms of its agenda and the levelling up agenda as well, ensuring jobs, growth, prosperity are spread across all of the regions in the United Kingdom. And this really is the top priority of ours as a government. This sector plays a huge role in realising our ambitions. In developing our coastal hubs, a priority will also be ensuring we can find and use clean maritime technologies for the future. And here in the United Kingdom, green maritime tech is already worth £4 billion. And this is expected to grow to a whacking great 13 billion by the end of the decade. Fuel switching, fuel efficiency, electric and hybrid vessels, emission control are just some of the areas where the UK has great strengths. And together with the underlying digital technologies, including blockchain and cybersecurity enabled by 5G networks, the UK is really well placed to achieve Coastal Powerhouse vision. My department's priorities are enterprise, net zero and innovation, as you may have heard the Secretary of State say, ENZI. And all of these are key themes for creating a coastal powerhouse. In July, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, published our innovation strategy. And this sets out how we will create the right conditions for all UK businesses, really just making sure that we turn world-leading science into new products and services. And I'd urge you to have a read of that document. Some of our commitments to include increasing making it easier for businesses to access finance. That is just so important. And reviewing the regulatory landscape to encourage innovation. On enterprise, we're investing in improving management expertise through the Help to Grow programme, and we're spending £127 million through the Strength in Places fund to develop R&D capacity and support local growth across the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, at Net Zero, we have recently published our hydrogen strategy and to create a domestic hydrogen market which could support 9,000 jobs and be worth around about £900 million. And of course, we recognise that this will require enabling infrastructure, something that maritime sector stakeholders have raised as a critical issue across government. And this is captured in the hydrogen strategy. And of course, production of hydrogen is a coastal opportunity linked to renewable technologies for electricity generation. And so this will be a key area of interest as we really build a coastal powerhouse. And for example, through the Strength in Places Fund, we awarded £33 million in the decarbonation of marine transportation project to develop zero-emission hydrofoil ferries. We've also supported in Orkney a maritime application where it's been pioneered to commercial ferry application. And this is just a snapshot of some of the ways that government is supporting growth relevant to coastal development. This morning, Maritime UK are launching a Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto. And I welcome this contribution to a healthy debate on the opportunity. And I commend Maritime UK for taking this initiative. Of course, drastic change, like creating Coastal Powerhouse, can't be achieved by government alone. And I want to hear ideas from what industry can really do to make this a reality. I look forward to this discussion with the panel, and I wish you all a very productive and successful event. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and it's great to see you all. We're getting there in Shipping Week. I hope you're all enthused. I'm Richard Ballantyne from the British Ports Association. So we've had Tim from the UK Major Ports Group. So similar organisations working very close together, national associations. But I think it's only right that for this panel session, we give our honoured guest a bit of a kind of flavour from the regions. So we're going to kick off first of all with Anne-Marie from the Solent LEP. I wonder if you could just follow the Minister's speech there and talk about potentially, if very briefly if possible, because we're going to go to the floor for some questions shortly, just briefly about how this manifesto, as Tim very well articulated, how this manifesto, what it means to the regions particularly, and what we can do with it in Solent and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and I'll take your hint at briefly and keep it very short. I think today is a really important day for the regions. It's fantastic to be here in London at London International Shipping Week, and rather like the Minister, lovely to actually engage with people again personally. It's 2 years since we were here, and I think in that time the role of the regional hubs has developed, and I think it's really important that the Coastal Manifesto does realise and unlock the potential of our coastal powerhouses around the United Kingdom. Very often they've been seen as areas where with socio-economic challenges that people have felt have been difficult to unlock. But I think we are now reaching a point, and maritime being at the beating heart of, if you like, an era where we can use the assets of the maritime sector to unlock the potential and the opportunity of those coastal areas. And certainly in an area such as the Solent, we have an absolutely fantastic array of maritime assets. It's very exciting to be with the Minister when we've got such brilliant research assets with our university capability and the National Oceanography Centre and some of our private sector partners all pushing boundaries in areas such as clean tech, looking at new opportunities around hydrogen. So I'm really excited to be engaging in this debate and to use the opportunity to work with my colleagues such as Sheldon and those around the country to actually drive forward this agenda and unlock that opportunity to sort of level up all the communities across the country and to unlock the growth that we genuinely believe is there. So thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. That was quite concise, actually, so I'm very pleased. Sorry if I'm being a bit of a rigid chair, but we're on a strict timetable today. So moving over to Sheldon Ryan from Maritime UK Southwest. One of the things I think Tim described was about transport connections, particularly, which he, not just transport connections, of course, but the Southwest is one of those parts of the UK that, really does sometimes suffer being at the end of the line, so to speak. But Sheldon, perhaps you want to touch on that and also some of the points in the Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto that's relevant to your part of the world.
Yes, yeah, by all means, thanks very much. Yeah, Tuesday morning, 5 o'clock train, arriving just in time for the parliamentary cruise. Yeah, 5-hour train journey from the Southwest is a little bit too long, so any help we can get on that. But yes, I completely, welcome the points in the Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto. I think how that kind of translates into the Southwest, particularly on infrastructure. We have a once in a generation opportunity with floating offshore wind, 50 gigawatts of power in the Celtic Sea, enough by 2050 to power the whole of the UK. And yet at the moment, we don't have the grid infrastructure capable of importing that power. Neither do we have the port infrastructure that will be required to hit the government 60% target for UK supply chain. So in terms of infrastructure, of course, that's huge. Also, in terms of, with our free port designation, which is very much welcomed, having the correct power, such as what's just happened in Solent with their electric charging into your cruise terminal. We need to have that kind of infrastructure in place, and that will drive our coastal economy. We in the Southwest have an economy roughly the size of Greater Manchester, and we have 700 miles of coastline, 10 ports, so really the whole thing is coastal. Although I did notice the bit right in the centre, the heart disease kind of was a little bit better, so I'm taking a little solace in that. For us, I think also one of the key things is, our productivity lags. We're around 10 to 15% below the UK average, and yet our maritime sector is well above. So investing in maritime is a key thing for the Southwest. What we need, I think, is continued investment in innovation. We've had 2 really successful innovation programs in the Southwest, one in Cornwall, one in Devon, because of the nuances of the RDF funding. what we're looking to launch today through the Ocean Futures programme that you'll have on your tables is a programme of innovation such that we can raise that productivity, particularly looking around maritime, but then also invest in anchor technologies such as marine autonomy and clean maritime that will anchor high productivity businesses into the southwest and really kind of drive that regional growth. So yeah, that's probably the comment from me.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Sheldon. Yeah. Now I'll give the challenge the audience to come up with get their thinking hats on and come up with some ideas for questions, because this is very much a interactive session. But before I do that, Minister, I'll just come back to you. So sorry, thank you so much, Minister. And firstly, I would say I was probably one of the people who greeted you earlier talking about the reshuffle, so I do apologise. I'm sure it's a bit of an unusual and a difficult time, a challenging time, but you seem to be kind of enjoying the company all the less anyway. So just to follow, some of the points that Anne-Marie and Sheldon and then Tim made about our coastal regions. I suppose a strategic point for us, as particularly for the maritime industry here, but also with our partners at the Local Government Association with their special interest group looking at coasts, is I guess there's a challenge for us and government on how we communicate across the whole of government. We have excellent relationships with our sponsor department, the Department for Transport, who has a lot of regulatory functions in terms of maritime and one or two other things in relation to promoting what we do. But sort of wider, DIT, Treasury, MHCLG, DEFRA, Home Office and Borders, etc. They all have a very much an interest in our coasts. Some of them regulatory, some of them more sort of business focused and trade focused. But I wondered whether you, as and your department, as the business department, might consider sort of how it can bring that together and look at things like the Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto, and perhaps sort of help us in a way work with government to promote what we need and what would benefit our coastal regions better. And I think you'll find a lot of the asks, although there are some points on transport infrastructure funding, the points that Tim articulated, for example, are to do with sort of planning and regulatory changes, things that are relatively cheap and possible for government in this sort of post-pandemic era. So sorry, I've given you a bit of a long intro there, Minister, but if you want to come back, I saw you frantically looking through the manifesto. So well done. I won't ask you to quote what's on page 7 and paragraph 3 or something, but.
Okay, well, page 7 is about levelling up, which is where I'm going to start. Right. So I have looked at it. Thank you for that very long question. And yes, so there's a couple of things I would love to take on board with that. So first of all, really important that we do work across government departments. And that's certainly one of the things that I've been striving to do, not just within the maritime sector, but from a base perspective. So, for example, I was at a space meeting last night. It's really important we work with the Department for Transport. It's really important that we work with lots of other departments as well. And clearly, from a maritime point of view and from a base perspective, one of the things that we do is have regular meetings. And I think as well, there's a couple of other things just to mention. The innovation strategy. I mean, one of the really important things that we work really, really hard on that, having regular meetings. And I think anybody who has read the innovation strategy will see that it really clearly articulates the way forward. It really articulates around businesses working together, and it articulates a levelling up agenda, which clearly has maritime in it. I think the other thing just to mention as well is that there is a levelling up white paper that will be published shortly in the fall, in the autumn. I gather everything is shortly and in the fall, imminently. But anyway, it is imminent and it is going to be published. And within that is very much again cross department, because it's really important that we do that. But I think it really, from a base perspective, and the Secretary of State will say this very clearly if he were here as well, that we do remember that BASE stands for business. And we are really keen just to make sure that we support all businesses across this country to thrive. And we see that, and not really wishing to do a cliche, but build back better, it's really important, and maritime is part of that. I hope that wasn't too long-winded for you, but there we go. Some thoughts on that.
More concise than me, actually. But anyway, there we go. So again, yeah, audience, get your thinking caps on, because I'm going to go to Tim first, but and then we'll have some opportunities for you to ask some questions of the Minister and the panel on this exciting time for the sector. So Tim, without putting you on the spot too much, because I've realised this isn't your sort of day job, I wondered if you might, with your Maritime UK hat on, talk about how we are as a sector, and I'll be supporting you and Ben and others, may be able to push the manifesto out to our sort of target audience of policymakers and sort of government leaders in this area.
I think one of the great things about doing this manifesto on a Maritime UK basis is that by its nature, what we have is the combined, not just power, but reach of the sector. And I think that, utilising that is important. But I think, it's making sure that we're telling the stories of what happens and what the potential is. As Anne-Marie quite rightly mentioned, there are tremendous assets and opportunities all around the UK coast. But by their very geographical nature, they have all too often been geographically peripheral or literal. Right? But what we need to do is collectively do a better job of telling the strong stories as well as the sort of more conventional communications mechanisms. So I think there's a fantastic story to tell, and some of the videos you'll see shortly are just, it's a cliche, but sort of inspirational about what's going on. We need to tell that story better. And what we want to do is, and I know this from ports, but I also know from many other sectors, is work with the minister and her peers in delivering some of these outcomes that are good not just for industry, not just good for the coastal communities, but actually bring real benefits to the UK as a whole. Net zero transition, stronger trading. These are the things that benefit people living in West Bromwich as much as they do in Plymouth. Right? So I think here is an opportunity to level up not just the UK, the coast, but across the economy of the UK as well. And what you have in maritime industries are partners ready and willing, and indeed wanting to invest in order to do it.
Thank you, Tim. So we've got time for some questions. Have we got any points from the floor? This is where I'm met by Deathly Silence. Right, there's a couple. So we go to Harry, please, first. Is the microphone working its way to you?
Thank you very much. Minister, first, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm Harry Fiochari. I'm with Norton Rose Fulbright firm here. First of all, thank you very much for coming today. We really do value that. What I'm about to say is going to sound like a rant, but it's more of a plea. I'm a former chair of Maritime UK, and I've tried to work very hard, particularly with the coastal economies, because I believe they can really be the lifeblood of this nation. This is an island nation. The issue that we have right now is this. And can I first begin by saying I fully endorse the manifesto. I think it's fundamentally important, but we have a huge problem. And the problem is that the shipping and maritime industries, including all the ports, the shipbuilders and everybody else, is at a pivotal moment in time. We have never had the challenges that we face today. We have the energy transition to deal with, and we have the advent of new and disruptive technologies which you touched upon. Artificial intelligence, autonomous shipping, blockchain. Now, at the main conference yesterday, the LISW conference, we were working on the basis that this transition is going to cost the sort of global maritime businesses, and this includes all the infrastructure that Sheldon was talking about and electrification of the ports, somewhere in the region of between $1.9 trillion and $3.2 trillion. Now, you rightly said, government can't do this by itself. You need to work in partnership with industry. But what I can tell you for absolutely certain is that industry cannot do this at all. We simply won't do it without government. And what is beginning to concern me, and I've had these discussions with your colleagues, Graham Stewart, over a number of years, with Nadeem Zahawi before he's sort of moved on, and more recently with Jerry Grimstone. But giving us 24 million for research into zero carbon technologies is almost a waste of time. When you look at the money that Singapore are putting in, the money that the Norwegians are putting, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. We as an industry have huge potential in this nation. I think we have some of the finest brains, some of the best universities, and we can really take a lead in these new and disruptive technologies, but we simply won't manage to do it without real government support and real financial support. What I'm delighted to be able to tell you, and I'm surprised that neither Tim nor Richard have touched on this, but one of the points I always used to make in my speeches is that the ports are some of the biggest investors in this nation. Every year they come up with over 650 million US or thereabouts. I always check the figures with the fellas before I used to sort of reel them out. I haven't done for a while. It's probably more now. But the ports are not frightened to invest. But, we're talking about, it's a drop in the ocean when we're talking about hundreds of billions and trillions. So, I say it's a plea for government to understand that without a great maritime nation, without great maritime infrastructure, maritime businesses, this island nation simply won't flourish. It's a fact of life. And we do need much more government support. And I'd like to know how we can get it, Minister. Wow.
Well, that wasn't really a rant, actually. I mean, it's just, I think it's always worthwhile pointing out these things. And thank you very much for articulating that so clearly. And one of the things that, I mean, clearly this isn't just a BAE's responsibility, as you will know, you've spoken to the other departments as well. And Lord Grimstone, absolutely, I know, will be incredibly supportive and will, I'm sure, lend his ear to all of this. And it is a challenge. And one of the things that I do, obviously got Mark here as well, is have ongoing, within my portfolio, ongoing stakeholder conversations. I think that's really important to find out the reality of where we are. But clearly, I'm hearing what you're saying. I understand. And one of the things that you talked about was government support and then financial support. I'd be interested to know what the other support would be apart from financial, because just being honest, we've got a spend review coming up. I don't know how that's going to pan out. But I think there is an opportunity for us to look at are there other ways of giving support as well. So I think, stakeholder, I'm really always happy to have meetings around that. But I suspect a lot of what you're talking about is around finance, and I would suspect a lot of that finance will come from other departments as well. But I give you my guarantee I can go back and certainly talk to Robert Courts, who I know you would have spoken to probably earlier this week as well, and also Lord Grimstone and whoever else it is relevant.
I don't dog the floor, but one of the big issues that we have is that we're going to get into new and untested, untried technologies here.
Yeah.
And investors are not prepared to take those risks on the whole, because we're talking about huge amounts of money. So without government support, we're really going to struggle. And the government did this for renewable energy, for example. And it would be great if we could have a little bit of that for the maritime industry.
Yeah, I mean, and again, just to come back on that, I mean, I understand very clearly what you're saying, and those conversations definitely do need to take place. But I'm fairly sure that you will be having those conversations. I will take them back. And it is a challenge. And looking at the innovation strategy that I have mentioned already, one of the things we really do want to encourage is that business investment. We really do need to do that within my portfolio, not just thinking about maritime, but clearly there's a broader innovation challenge as well. We're really keen to make sure that we're doing that. But I will take back your points.
No, thanks very much. I think it's a lively debate, of course. Harry very well articulates some of our asks, and there will be a lot of detail behind this, which we obviously will look forward to discussing with your officials across government, etc. But I think it's important to say, Harry is excellently spot on about there's certain things that might not necessarily be commercial yet, and government would really help us by taking the lead on things like decarbonisation technology, etc. Because once we get going, the sector, as Harry described, the ports industry that Tim and I represent, it does invest itself. It attracts either, investment from traditional or other types of lenders. This is not really at, draining on government. So we're asking for, as Harry describes, a bit of a drop in the ocean in terms of some of the public spending, etc. But I think there's more to be said on this. It's quite a detailed topic, so we won't be able to sort of pin that down today. I see, yes, we've got one there, and Harvey's coming out. Yes, thank you.
Minister Simon Barnes from the University of Kent. Just on behalf of all universities, really pleased to see the innovation strategy. And I think universities are finally realising from a maritime sector their importance in the future of the maritime sector. And it was good to see in the competition yesterday, probably 10 universities engaging in that competition. And I think that's something we've probably been quite bad at in the past compared to other sectors like automotive, where that relationship has been so much stronger. So speaking on behalf of all the university sectors, I think we recognise our role in innovation. and also in the coastal infrastructure and understanding some of the health issues and some of the wider community issues that we see. The one thing, though, I think perhaps we're struggling with is this replacement for the regional funding, and where that's going to go, and how universities and other organisations and business can be engaged in that replacement for the regional funding, because I think it's really important that we recognise the role of that funding potentially to look at projects where we can work collaboratively with other universities and also with local business to address some of the issues that the Coastal Powerhouse talks about. And there seems to have been a bit of a stall in terms of that funding, i.e. the Community Renewal Fund. We still haven't seen the outcome of that, for example. So I guess my call is, we're here as universities, we need to do a better job. We are doing a better job than we have. But understanding what the regional structure is and what the regional funding structure is would really help us in terms of getting traction on some of those ideas you're already funding. So that's my observation. Thank you very much.
We're putting you on the spot here.
That's why I'm here. Can I go now? Number 10 have got, no, they haven't. I think you made really, really good points again, and it's really important that all of those that you do have the opportunity to raise those points. So a couple of things on what you're saying. I mean, as you probably know, I live in Derby, which apparently is furthest from the sea. I don't know whether you know that. And so regional funding is one of the things that, as an MP, I'm just really concerned about, not even just from a ministerial point of view, and it's something that I know that we're working our way through, and is complex and complicated. But in terms of the innovation strategy as well, and there are some strategies. We mentioned AI earlier. We've got an AI strategy that's coming out later this year. There's the space strategy as well, but the innovation strategy, as you say, is already here. It's not just about having a shiny strategy. I think one of the things that certainly Secretary of State and myself are really keen to do is actually bring these things to life as well and make them happen. And certainly what we're trying to do is encourage people to come forward with ideas and with suggestions around that. And again, my offer is, if there's something that you feel that would be helpful, whilst ever I do have this role, I believe in doing it to the very best of my capability, and that is around bringing things alive, and it's about the action that would sit behind that. So again, the offer is, if there's something that you feel that we could and should be doing, then let's have a conversation around that. University is really important in terms of the innovation portfolio. Also, one of the things, just on the complete side, you've seen ARIA as an example. It's going to be this high agility, sort of high risk kind of funding agency that is literally an agency that will give funding. So there's lots of things that we're doing, but if we are missing something, then please do let me know, and that's an offer to everybody here.
Very good. Anne-Marie, I just want to come to you if possible, and we mentioned government spending, public spending, and obviously as a local enterprise partnership, there has been funding allocated from the LEPs, and not least to ports in your region. And obviously we've seen some exciting announcements around shore power at the Port of Southampton, other developments at Portsmouth. I just wondered if you want to kind of articulate about what's happened there and how you've managed to stimulate some of this activity.
Yeah, thank you. And just to sort of build on some of the points the Minister talked about earlier, and some of the points that Harry made. I think from our perspective, we've had significant support from BEIS. It would be remiss not to say that, through funding to develop some business support and innovation hubs in the region. And indeed, earlier this week, working with the Solent Maritime Enterprise Zone in the Solent, which is a Royal Navy endeavour, and Connected Places, we've announced the Solent Maritime Innovation Gateway, which comes on the back of the publication of the innovation strategy, because we do believe this is a collective endeavour, a collaborative endeavour, bringing together partners nationally and locally, public and private sector. Alongside that, we have had local growth funding, and we've had a fantastic week, both up here in London announcing the Innovation Gateway, but also in the Solent. We were able to put £8 million into a £55 million cruise terminal, which is open now, and we heard MSC Cruises announce that they are going to bring more ships to the Solent, which brings much more investment to the Solent, beyond maritime, to the visitor economy, to our shoreside services and our supply chain. So that's a very big step for us, a small amount of money from ourselves, unlocking what will be quite a significant investment in the Solent, because each cruise ship delivers £3 million to our economy. So every call is important to us. On a broader basis, and looking at the themes that the Minister talked about, and net zero, really important to us, and we've used our funding to invest in the first commercial shore power facility, which will go live at the Port of Southampton for 2 of the cruise terminals in November. But I think, reflecting on Harry's point, our work is only starting. It's a good start. We want to support bringing together our private and public sector partners to sort of pathfind and be in the vanguard of the agendas around innovation, enterprise and net zero. But the world is moving at a massive pace, and that transition to net zero and some of the sort of digital transitions around blockchain, we want to be at the front and continue to be in the vanguard, leading the way for maritime, and therefore it is important that we don't lose momentum as those around us on the global stage sort of ramp up their efforts. And I think in that regard, Richard, we're really keen to support BEIS as a local enterprise partnership in taking this agenda forward. And with funding from BEIS, we have been able to set up Maritime UK Solent, which, you know, we're really grateful for being able to showcase the sort of cluster in our region that is, you know, at the beating heart of our economy. So sometimes small amounts of seed funding can unlock so much more, and that's what's happened in our area. It's small money by the standards of the trillions that Harry's talked about, but it has unlocked hundreds of millions, and it has brought momentum and a unity of spirit to the work that we're going to do together with our partners in the Royal Navy and Connected Places. And very recently, we obviously secured the opportunity to deliver on the Freeport. So Solent's one of the 8, very much like Sheldon. We're working very hard now to drive that agenda forward. And that has 3 sort of big priorities at the heart of it. One around trade and investment, one around regeneration and jobs, and one around, you know, making sure that our sort of innovation hubs in the Solent remain at the cutting edge of what is good in terms of maritime innovation. So we're really keen to exploit that opportunity, but obviously with the spending review coming up and being a little bit cheeky with the Minister here, I think it's really important that we don't overlook what seems to be small amounts of money for some colleagues. Those hubs that BEIS have invested in have been absolutely fundamental to being the glue in bringing our partners together in the region. So we really hope we can continue to build on that work. So I hope that helps, Richard, in terms of giving a flavour.
Yeah, and Sheldon, just coming to you. I mean, we've obviously got the Minister here, key person in our sort of attempts to get the coastal sector recognised better across government. So just in the going back to the manifesto that we're publishing today, I wonder if you can, you know, we've heard about funding. Obviously, this is not all about funding. It can be helpful, etc. But I wonder if you've got any sort of key asks from the region that you would show to the Minister is a way that, you know, perhaps a little bit of money or a little bit of support, that ends up being, you know, we're not just asking for money for sticking plasters, etc. We're asking for a little money or a bit of political support to get things going, to drive things that generate jobs, generate private investment, etc. So I wonder if you've got any sort of views from the Southwest here that we can pitch to the Minister, so to speak.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't, would I? Yeah, so since 2017, across the Southwest, we've pulled together an awful amount of funding for innovation around maritime. And I think we've really created a lot of momentum in the Ocean Futures prospectus that we're launching today. We've brought together around 30 partners. We've got Babcock, organisations like Thales, 4 universities, you know, the whole of the Southwest really corralled around what are our strategic opportunities in marine and maritime. We worked through the City deal to set up, like yourselves, the first maritime enterprise zone around Ocean's Gate. So we have the infrastructure in place on Western Europe's largest naval dockyard in Plymouth. We've established the Smart Sound, so the most connected and most studied body of water anywhere in the world. That has become the de facto kind of place for testing and developing marine autonomy and digital maritime technologies. What we're looking for really, and I think, Tim, if you wrote the manifesto, I think fair play, because actually, they're, and in accordance with what Harry was saying as well, I think what's really, really important in as and when shared prosperity funding comes on stream, that it's not entirely used for projects that are just visible, but projects that can raise productivity working across SMEs. So what we're asking for is around £8 million to continue our innovation service to make sure that those universities, the enterprise zones, the catapults that are active in this area can actually transform our very capable 25,000 or so SMEs to raise their productivity and achieve UK capability around marine autonomy, around cleaning maritime, and create a kind of digital ocean future in the southwest, but also working for the UK. So that would be my ask, that when shared prosperity comes online, that it is focused on innovation and on delivering productivity growth for the regions.
Great stuff, Sean. I think, Tim, you may want to come back on some of the previous discussions, but I've got a question for you first.
Oh, of course.
Which was around, there's a lot of talk about funding, and I don't want the ministers to go away and think that we're just asking for money. That would be kind of, that would be wrong. I mean, there's a lot of points you covered in your introductory comments, Tim, that are detailed in the manifesto itself. And I wondered if you want to touch on those sort of non-fiscal measures, planning or other things. And that is, they may be difficult sometimes for governments to swallow. I mean, planning, saw some of the debate yesterday about Robert Jenrick's role, etc., and about giving more control to developers, etc., which we as a sector, we want to encourage people to invest, etc. So the planning easements could be really helpful. But Tim, do you want to follow up on some of those points?
So the minister's challenge is absolutely right. So I mean, we'll go back to Harry's challenge is absolutely right on the funding side, but the minister's challenge is absolutely right about, okay, that's, I hear the message about money, but what can you do without money? Because, it's a tough spending review, yeah? So 3 things, specific things. First of which is InBase, which is offshore, reaping the benefits for coastal communities of offshore development. And that would be about really, really ensuring that the offshore value targets for the UK, so if somebody comes to you and say, right, we're going to put a wind farm in Dogger Bank and 60% of the value of that supply chain value, call it what you will be captured by the UK, that we really ensure that that happens. And it doesn't become, as they go into the project delivery, a bit too difficult and we'll source it from Norway or the Netherlands, right? So that's number one. Offshore value targets. You do that, you get businesses really looking to develop their activities here in the UK. That'll drive huge levels of value. If you go to places like Grimsby and Lowestoft, you can see the difference, physical difference on high streets that that kind of projects make. So that's number one. Secondly, planning and development rules. We absolutely understand that planning can be a contentious issue, right? No doubt about that at all. What we never ask for is a kind of Wild West. But there are some things that already exist that could be used more broadly or more effectively. So local development orders can be very successful when they happen. London Gateway is a good example of it. You would get other examples in Great Yarmouth, for example, but they don't happen often enough because they're quite resource intensive for the local authority to do early on. So some changes to that to make them more useful or more applicable, that would help. And then thirdly, the next time you see Rishi, if you could mention, could you extend the super deduction, right? Now, I know this is slightly getting into money terms, but it's not cash money. Or it's not cash money to, upfront cash money to the Treasury. Maritime is a long horizon business, right? The super deduction is actually the right thing to be doing, right? giving people tax breaks on making substantial capital investments. But for a long horizon business like Maritime, the 2-year duration is a bit short. By the time you've procured, you've bought, you've designed, you've commissioned, we're halfway through it now, and it's kind of difficult to make the big projects happen. So that's the third thing. Ask Rishi if it would be good enough to extend the super deduction. He can target it if he wants. I'd obviously put my hand up for ports. I'd be prepared to extend it for maritime more generally, but you may want to target it around some of the green, the substantial green investments that we're talking about that Harry mentioned. So those are 3 things that don't cost government cash money right now, that unlock money from all of us to invest.
Excellent, very good. So some more questions from the floor. John. Wait for a mic to come to you.
Thank you. And Minister, maybe some good news to you, because this is really talking about something that doesn't cost any money, which is always everybody here who's in the maritime industry, we think it's the greatest industry in the world. We think it's well known. Everybody thinks we think it's a great industry to work in, and we'd love our children to come into it. But you go outside this room, and who knows about the industry? It's this hidden industry. If you look in the newspapers, they'll talk about aviation, they'll talk about rail transport, but they don't talk about the maritime sector. But one of the big developments that's come through over the last few years has been the clusters who've worked religiously. We've got Chris working with Mersey Maritime. I won't say too much about it, he's already had his gong. We've got the Solons and the tremendous work that they're doing in that area. And they're spreading the voice of the industry. And if the industry is known in the area, then people will come and work in the industry. People will invest in the industry. But the noise has got to be, we've got to ramp up the noise. We've tried to do it this week with London International Shipping Week. We are grateful for the work that government has done this week. We've seen ministers, past and present, all over the place, and they've done a tremendous job. But what we would like is next week, the minister's still thinking about the shipping industry and the maritime communities, and thinking about it in October and November, because this noise must continue, because that will keep sustain our industry. And this does not cost that money. All it means is just remembering us, please.
Well, Minister, you can take that one away with you. Just remember us. Don't forget about us when you leave. That's the serious point.
I think it's a really important point, and Mark won't let me forget about you, but it is part of my portfolio as well. But I think I would come back, and maybe not for now. And I understand completely what you're saying. It's like I live in a political world, and I think everybody's interested in politics and reshuffle. Thank you. But they're not actually. But I just wonder what it is that we could do to support that extension of people getting interested, because I understand exactly what you're saying actually, and I like I say, I live in Derby. Clearly aviation is a really important part of it, because I've got Rolls-Royce literally on my doorstep. But what is it that you're suggesting that we could do? Because I will keep on thinking about this next week, October, January. I can do that, but does that actually help you? And so not for now maybe, but if you have some ideas that you could share that would help to that would be really helpful.
I think what we'd say, Tim's given some specific requests, but I think as a kind of starter, and that will be sort of cross-government sort of responsibilities. Different parts of government would have the policy levers potentially to kind of look at pulling. But I think what, in response to the Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto, is potentially how we can encourage, we've given you, government, our ideas on this, and perhaps we're looking for a bit of a formal response from government as to whether they sort of adopt and I'm looking at Ben now in case he's going to kind of turn the mic off, but whether or not we need a coastal development and growth strategy across government, and whether, the maritime sector is going to be pivotal to that. I think we've previously talked about having a coastal development or growth minister almost, or someone with that sort of policy responsibility specifically lined out in their role. So that let's have this as a sort of a first discussion, and perhaps if you're happy, Minister, we'll come back to you when things have died down in Westminster somewhat with and fresh out some of the details, because as well as the points that your fellow panelists have made, I think there's some things we can do to kick things off as industry and sort of government partnership. Right, I think we're coming to the end of our section now, because we're going to move on and see some videos. But before we do that, Anne-Marie, you're going to wrap things up, I think, from this section point of view. And I think, Minister, you're very welcome to stay. We'd love to have you here.
I think I have to.
Yeah, okay. Well, can I just ask for a round of applause for our panel ministers, members and our ministers?
Richard, and conscious of time, I just wanted to round up by trying to summarise the breadth of the comments today. And I wanted to actually start with the innovation and strategy, because I really think the strapline says everything about why innovation is important to the maritime industry, and why in particular maritime in the United Kingdom kind of captures and epitomises the strapline. The strapline on the innovation strategy is leading the future by creating it. And I think we do that in maritime for the UK. I think we lead it globally, and we are creating the future in maritime. So, you know, it's almost like an embodiment of the strapline for the innovation strategy. And I think some of the themes that we've discussed this morning around supporting businesses lie at the heart, I think, of some of the Minister's comments earlier, and indeed the strategy. And something, you know, that I think is dear to all our hearts, we talked a bit about skills and innovation talent. This is a nation of innovators. The sort of university and research capability here is the best in the world. So how do we bring that together, working across our clusters, with industry, with the public sector, with government, to make sure that we remain best in class? And I think Harry set down some challenges earlier that are a good takeaway from this event. How do we make sure that transition to net zero, that transition to new digital technologies and things like blockchain remain at the uppermost of our minds? And some of that is about strategic investment, but definitely some of it is about our convening power as Maritime UK and as regional clusters to bring people together, because there are agglomeration benefits that start to fall out when people come together. I think we've heard today about the role of maritime, and Sheldon talked about it as well as myself, being the lifeblood or the beating heart of the UK PLC economy and within the regions. And as sort of regional clusters, we do want to make sure our coastal communities play a full role in that levelling up and building back agenda that the Minister talked about. And I think some of the work that Sheldon's doing on ocean futures and that we're doing in the Solent Maritime Innovation Gateway are good examples of the sorts of things we can do as coastal communities to work with you, Minister, and the government departments to drive this forward. And I think in closing this session, when we look at coastal communities, I think the role of the ports are fundamentally important. They are catalysts for growth. You know, it's great working with Tim and Richard, and I completely echo Harry's comments. You know, we have some fantastic ports in the Solent. The Port of Southampton is, you know, a stone throw away from the sort of international shipping superhighway, and they are absolutely a catalyst for growth, not just in the Solent, but for the Midlands with the automotive industry. And when we see stats like, you know, the maritime sector, playing a role when 95% of goods that leave the UK leave by sea, I think it is fair to make sure that we do keep at the uppermost of our minds the role our ports play, both in terms of being gateways, but also in terms of as major investors. Our ports in our areas are making significant investment at the moment to sort of make sure they stay at the front of the agenda. And final closing comments is about the road to net zero. There is clearly a number of challenges there, but there are also a number of opportunities. And I think we'll see that come out in the second part of the session, where we start to look at some of the work that our colleagues are doing around the clusters to make sure that we see a new sector emerge, a clean maritime sector, again, that can create new opportunities. So I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions, and the Minister as well for your time and your thoughts today, and Tim and colleagues, and look forward to working with you all on the agenda moving forward. So thank you.
So I think just to say, sorry, we're going to have a short video played now. I understand. I can see a lot of IT boffins at the back. Seem to be working, do we? There we go.
Britain's maritime sector is linked to our island's rich history, to the exploration, free trade, the global exchange, which fired the Industrial Revolution and laid the foundations for modern Britain. Only last week I visited the Anglesey Maritime Museum, which has an incredible celebration of everything that maritime has done for this country. That's why we've invested nearly £250 million to support hundreds of regenerative projects right across the country through our Coastal Communities Funds. Ambitious schemes such as Waters of the Wash in King's Lynn, making this Norfolk Harbour town a unique sailing destination, complete with their new pontoon and swing mooring in the heart of their historic district. We want to see investments like these delivering tangible results that people can see and feel taking place around them, especially in the coastal towns and villages that can be small in size, but which make a huge contribution to the maritime economy. It's these places that stand to benefit through the investment through our Towns Fund. In fact, of the 101 towns receiving a deal, 22 of them lie on the coast, each one receiving a share of over £500 million to invest in their cultural assets while building the next generation of roads, bridges, railway stations and 5G networks. This is the kind of job-creating, life-enhancing infrastructure that, on top of our £4.8 billion Levelling Up Fund, will support our long-term recovery. Our aim, as the Prime Minister has set out, is not to return to the world as it was before the pandemic, but to truly level up prosperity, opportunity and pride right across the whole country. We will set out what this involves in more detail in our Levelling Up White Paper later this year. And as we consider what's needed for sustainable growth, we have to diversify local economies so that there are more well-paid local jobs across different sectors. In green energy, for example, we are increasingly leading the way internationally, with Cumbria home to one of the largest offshore wind farms in the world at Wenley Extension, and we want to build on this momentum as part of our journey to net zero. To that end, through our offshore wind investment programme, we are grant funding investments in the manufacture of more offshore wind components while creating up to 60,000 new green jobs in the process. In last year's budget, the Chancellor announced 8 new free ports. This means tax breaks, rebates for investments and lower trading tariffs for places like Liverpool, Teesside and Felixstowe. Supply side measures that will spur real investment in infrastructure improvements in and around these ports, repurposing old industrial sites to capture and store carbon, to process raw goods and ready for them to export. These new free ports will help lay the groundwork for an economic resurgence, not just in our ports and harbours, but for the sector as a whole, backed by a maritime recovery plan, which we'll publish later this year. Our ambition is to help the sector lead the UK's green recovery from the pandemic and chart a clear course to net zero. That's one of the reasons why we launched the Clean Maritime Demonstration Competition, incentivising industry to bring forward innovative, clean maritime and smart shipping projects. We are on the cusp of an exciting and unprecedented period of reform and growth, with new hubs for global trade, resurgent seaside towns and rich and diverse economies. And as a maritime sector empowered to both bounce back from this pandemic and bounce forward as part of our green recovery. In government, we're keen to work with Maritime UK and partners from right across the public and the private sectors to make this vision a reality, a cleaner, greener, global Britain, truly building back better. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your webinar. Britain's maritime sector is linked to our...
Fantastic, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Chris Shirling-Rook. I'm the Chief Executive of Mersey Maritime and also Assistant Chair of Maritime UK. So if I could ask our next panel to come up, please, our friends from Northern Ireland, from Solent, and also from the Southwest. Whilst this panel is assembling, I'm just going to give you a very quick background to the sort of final canter of this morning's event. It's wonderful, actually, to have a Coastal Communities Day, Coastal Powerhouse Day, which is really focusing on our cluster organisations. 2 years ago, this didn't exist. In fact, you know, everybody on this panel now is a friend. and it shows real focus and probably enlightenment that not only a government seeing how important our coastal communities are, but actually our coastal communities are really grasping what a cluster organisation can do. So to give you a brief background of Mersey Maritime, we're about 20 years old. We noticed, well, 20 years ago, obviously I wasn't there then, I would have been 3. No, too soon for that. We noticed that we had a supply chain in the northwest, but we didn't have a community. So actually we needed an organisation to glue that supply chain, that community together and reap the benefits. So, such as government engagement, focusing on skills, focusing on careers, and really driving that inward investment that we've seen. We joined Maritime UK 5-6 years ago, and as chief exec, I really needed convincing, because obviously there's still the sort of, we're regions, we're independent, we can sort of do it ourselves. But we joined Maritime UK on the understanding that we wanted to drive coastal communities, not just in the northwest, but across the UK. We saw the benefits of all working together, learning from each other, sharing our knowledge. And that's brought us to today, not only are coastal communities and cluster organisations in Maritime 2050, but we have this wonderful Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto that we've launched earlier today. So with a little look, well, it's more than a little look, we don't need any look at all. We're going to be getting a brief snapshot from our members in the first half of this half, and then some more cluster organisations in the second half. So without further ado, can we show our video?
Solent was one of the first parts of the country to be designated as a free port, and that's expected to create 50,000 jobs, which is incredibly exciting. And that's across all parts of the sector, looking at how we can accelerate what's already a really strong maritime centre. You've also got the UK's largest scale shore power installation occurring to support the new cruise terminal that's being developed here at Southampton. From the Port of Portsmouth, we've got a hybrid ferry operated by Whitelink going over to the Isle of Wight, which is helping show how we can use these green technologies and show others around the country how they should work too. You've also got some really exciting innovation happening, not just on vessels and ports. We've got in the Solent a new innovation centre funded by the LEP to explore the breakdown of plastics so they can be reused and prevent their pollution. And clearly, plastics in the sea is one of the biggest scourges for our time in terms of man's impact on the environment. And at Portsmouth, you've got a brand new extended cruise berth taking the biggest ships across the world and an accompanying new cruise terminal. And that means that this part of the country is a real, true leader in cruise for the UK. Maritime in the southwest adds 3.8 billion to the economy, supports around 25,000 jobs, so it's a really significant driver, perhaps obviously for a region that has the sea on two sides. The southwest. It's also a real centre for innovation, where we're looking at things like automation and geospatial data. You've got a big defence footprint there too, and you've got some of the most renowned boat builders and super yacht manufacturers in the region, employing thousands of people in Plymouth, for instance. You've also got the world's first seagoing passenger ferry, which is powered by batteries, launched out of Plymouth last year. Plymouth and the surrounding area was designated as a free port, and that's a particular focus on marine technology and ocean science. Floating offshore wind is also a big opportunity, but importantly, something where there's significant activity already. You've now got 5 projects up and running in the Celtic Sea, and you've got the Floating Offshore Wind Accelerator to really accelerate the activity and develop the technologies that are required to unlock the potential from generating offshore wind but floating at sea as opposed to being fixed to the seabed. So that's really exciting. You've also got Plymouth designated as the UK's first national marine park, and that's fusing our role as a sector in celebrating and accessing the water, preserving marine life, and also understanding how we can better find the solutions to export those services and those expertise that are developed in places like Plymouth to the rest of the world. Maritime is very significant for the Liverpool City region. Around 50,000 people's jobs are supported by the sector, and it adds £4 billion to the economy. So massive, and that's no surprise when you think the 45% of trade between the UK and the US that travels across the ocean goes through Liverpool. And not only is it about trade, you've also got cruise booming in Liverpool, and you've got really impressive advanced manufacturing in terms of shipbuilding in particular that's happening. The RSS David Attenborough that was built at Camel Lead and servicing the Antarctic and elsewhere is based on what's been able to be done in Liverpool and at Camel Lead in particular. So Mersey Maritime are spearheading a really exciting and transformational project in the form of the Maritime Knowledge Hub. Some £23 million of project that will help provide a collaborative space for SMEs and others working with manufacturers, innovators, universities to create the solutions that we need for the sustainability of the sector, but also other challenges around digitisation and efficiency. And that's a really important project that is being developed and borne out in the region. HyNet Northwest is a fantastic project in the region that is developing blue and green hydrogen that will play a role in not only decarbonising, which is one of the most polluting clusters of industrial activity in the UK, but also has a read across to maritime decarbonisation. And it's right that Mersey Maritime and others are right at the heart of that project.
Fantastic. And it just a brief glimpse of some of the amazing projects and energy which is going on all over the country. So we'll now move to our panel. So I'll just introduce them very, very quickly, and then we'll be delighted to hear what's going on in their various parts of the region. So from Maritime UK Solent, we have Graham Barneson and Stuart Baker. From the Southwest, we have Kevin Forshaw and Richard May. And from Northern Ireland and our friends from the Belfast Maritime Consortium, we have David Tyler. So, Graham and Stuart, if I may, obviously Chelsea fan and a Southampton fan, I thought I'd throw that in, managed to get in. What's going on with the Solent? What's the update?
Yeah, thanks Chris. Thanks for the intro, everybody. Yeah, Stuart Baker, Maritime Solent. We've recently incorporated ourselves, sort of formalising ourselves as a body to take forward the Solent Maritime Cluster, as Anne-Marie said earlier. In the earlier panel discussion, we've got so many assets in the Solent, a kind of embarrassment of riches, and it's great to be able to work collectively across the Maritime UK family to sort of hunt as a pack on the international scale. We're in forging new trading relationships with the world. The maritime sector, as Anne-Marie said, is hugely important to us in the Solent. Sort of land it geographically, we're right in the centre of the south coast with the Isle of Wight, the two port cities of Portsmouth and Southampton, the area in between. We have an outstanding sort of maritime and natural environment there that sits sort of cheek by jowl with intense industry. It's one of the most urbanised areas in England outside of London, population 1.3 million, and the maritime sector is 20% of our total economic output, so significant, contributing about 5.9 billion of GVA. Working with Maritime UK to update those figures as well through the new CBAR study that will come out later this year. About 152,000 people employed as part of the maritime sector as well, both within the Solent and more widely afield within the UK. And I think there's that gateway status for the Solent that is really, really critical. We've got two flourishing ports, the Port of Southampton in particular, the UK's gateway to the world, I would say. It is close to, or the nearest deep water port to that key international shipping lane as well. And I think as we look to forge those new relationships, trading relationships with the world, that becomes incredibly important to us. And of course, not only supports the levelling up of the Solent, which is very much at the end of the line in terms of transport and digital, just like many of the coastal communities that we heard about earlier, but also supports levelling up in the industrial heartlands of the North and the Midlands as well, particularly with the automotive sector. And getting those products to market as well. It's a hugely exciting time for us. You can see Captain Alan Newt here in the audience as well. It's a pleasure to work with him and Henry as well, who I think I did see earlier as well from Connected Places Catapult, for the launch of Solent Maritime Innovation Gateway as well earlier in the week, which was fantastic actually. And we've got, as I say, we've got all these innovators, all these innovation assets in a really sort of tight geography. And how can we actually bring them together, map them, so that when people, particularly internationally mobile investors, come to the region, we can support them with a really, really strong value proposition, around how they can grow and develop their business here in the UK. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic. It was.
I'm not sure I can answer too much from that really.
Stole your script.
What I would say though is and I think it's a theme which has come through in some of the conversations today, is it's all about collaboration, I think, and how we work together across the coastal powerhouse, but also how we work together across both the public sector, private sector, and the government. And as I sit here as a representative of the Solent LEP, I sit here as a representative of Maritime UK Solent. I also sit here as a CFO of Red Funnel, and we have a significant investment to make in new tonnage to build on the exceptional Red Kestrel which came out of Camel Laird in 2019. And at the moment, the technology and the solutions that we need for that new tonnage are not out there at the moment. And we need to be accelerating those discussions. We need to be accelerating that collaboration, and I think that's a key theme that we need to take away from this and some of the ongoing discussions.
Absolutely, and we'll perhaps touch or pick up on some of those themes a little later on. Kevin, morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Very well, thank you.
Kevin, we kind of transferred you back down south, didn't we, from Liverpool?
You did, yeah. I was in Liverpool for about 6 years, popping up to Liverpool on a regular basis. After being in the Solent area, I'm now down in the southwest, Plymouth. But,
so how's it going? Give us a feel for it.
So I'll give you a pocket sort of summary of what's been happening. So I joined the University of Plymouth 3 years ago. Richard May here, my colleague from Plymouth City Council. You've been in Plymouth a couple of years?
Nearly a couple of years, yeah.
So when Richard joined, Richard and I had a conversation around we need to pull everyone in Plymouth together. We need to get everyone together, and we did. we pulled together about 100 people, most of those companies, so they're large companies, but a lot of the SME community as well. And the purpose of that day was really to ask that community what Plymouth was better at than other bits of the UK, other bits of the world. More importantly, what was our contribution to the national marine and maritime economy? And it wasn't just Plymouth, it was the surrounds as well. And so we sort of centered down on three areas. So marine autonomy, and our colleagues in the Solar do some great stuff on marine autonomy as well, particularly on the platform R&D development side. But where we got to in Plymouth with the Smart Sound, which is this hugely connected stretch of water, is a real way to add the sensors and comms tech to those marine autonomy systems and really to sort of prove what they can do. So that was one area. We've done some interesting stuff on clean maritime. So not big ships, but really small vessels. So you've heard about the world's, the UK's first all-electric seagoing ferry. But, we're now looking at hydrogen infrastructure in the port as well. So we've got a key role to play around the small vessel opportunity. And the last area was that sort of connected oceans. So this massive increase in the ocean economy is all good, but we've got to realise that the ocean provides half the oxygen we breathe and absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide out the air. So critical as we go forward that these growth areas of floating wind, aquaculture are genuinely done in a sustainable way. And to measure sustainability, the first thing you've got to do is measure that ocean. And we haven't got Internet of Things in the ocean as we have on land. It creates new challenges. So that was the third area. Hugely exciting times in the southwest. Floating wind we talked about. So the Celtic Sea area, this is north of Cornwall, south of Wales, east of Ireland, that stretch of ocean. Most of the predictions are landing on rollout of 50 gigawatts of floating wind energy by 2050. Now, trying to get our heads around the scale of that opportunity is hard. So I'm going to try and unpack that now. 50 gigawatts is about 3,500 floating wind turbines. Each one of those the size of the Eiffel Tower. So this is currently state-of-the-art 12 megawatt wind turbines. Each one of those costing about £12 million. And it's not just the floating wind, it's the marine autonomous vehicles to collect the data, to accelerate the consenting, to inform the ongoing operational maintenance. It's the new vessel build. So people are talking about an additional 2,000 crew transfer vessels that will need to be manufactured to fulfill that opportunity. So that's massive. The other area for us that it is also going to grow very rapidly is aquaculture, because the growth in the ocean economy is largely around resource scarcity, and we're struggling to feed a planet careering towards a population of 9 billion. So aquaculture will grow tenfold in the UK. And again, marine autonomous systems for that real-time water quality monitoring, but all the specialist vessels that will have to be constructed to support that new opportunity. So exciting times. Richard, I'll have missed loads, so plug my gaps.
Well, actually, you've heard from Sheldon, you've heard from Kevin. And I think the Sheldon mentioned the fact we had 2 ERDF programs that have been running for the last 3-4 years or so. And they really brought together a lot of industry across not just sort of sizable organizations, but right down to those startups and some of the SMEs. And then naturally, we've created effectively a triple helix effect in the Southwest with some core universities and research partners. Sometimes we forget that in Plymouth alone, we've got some of the largest stock of marine scientists within Western Europe. And when they apply those to the applications that are going forward in terms of autonomy and everything else, and the digital oceans, it's a fantastic little hotbed of innovation. And so when the Freeport prospectus came out and they were looking for a hotbed of innovation, it raised our eyebrows such that we thought, well, we had something here. And as you heard, Plymouth won that designation, or is working towards that designation. And I think it really was around about the hotbed of innovation that we had our strength. And so we really got to make sure that that properly manifests. And that's not just Plymouth, that is the Coastal Powerhouse coming together and sitting behind those gems, those jewels that we have across the UK, understanding what they are, and actually over time making consensus in terms of how we work together. I mean, I think that we can put up these banners in terms of Coastal Powerhouse, but they've got to properly manifest, and we've got to properly work together. Otherwise, we'll be, stumbling over each other and not necessarily getting the maximum output that we can get as UK PLC. And I think hopefully we together today are growing aspiration towards, because ultimately the competition is not within the UK. The competition is outside the UK. Harry made that point very clearly. And if we don't come together and we don't muscle and strengthen in those core areas, some of which we've just heard, we will miss those opportunities. The time is now, and probably in some ways we've probably missed the boat in some of these areas already. When you think in terms of Korea, when you think in terms of Singapore, when you think in terms of China, etc. We're going to be, second fiddle, third fiddle, fourth fiddle, probably eighth fiddle before we know about it. And therefore we need to rally. Now, we asked for money from Amanda, and she hasn't got any. Yeah, I mean, let's be real. But we do have proper sinews. We have legacy assets that need to be brought forward. It's about our overall desire to come together and win in this game. And so hence why Ocean Futures was founded, because it's effectively a platform initially for the Southwest, but it doesn't have to be just Southwest, that's touting effectively those three areas that Kevin mentioned: autonomy, clean propulsion, digital ocean. And it's saying get behind that effort as a spearhead, as a trailblaze. It's sat within a free port setting, and it's likewise for Anne-Marie and Stuart in terms of Solent and other free ports, where we've got this incentive package to bring on foreign direct interest and investment, such that if we bring our marine stuff and we bring the free ports and we bundle them, blend them properly, and we get the likes of Bays and Amanda making sure her Innovate UK apparatus and stuff blend in properly as well, we've got something that's really very significant. But if we do it in isolation, we just won't have the full impact, and that's what we've got to try to do. Now we're trying to manifest something in the Southwest as a kickstart, but frankly it's a kickstart for the UK, working under the UK Maritime UK umbrella, and let it fly, let it grow, take the lid off and see what it can do. What I find really fascinating is that we're now getting so much industry in that triple helix. It starts off often with the universities, it starts off with those research elements, it starts off with some SMEs, but we're now getting some significant players who have an international client set that are now wanting to get involved in Ocean Futures. What we need to do is now allow them to lead, allow the industry to lead, with everything around them working well, and leverage their client set internationally, and bring forward those propositions that we as Maritime UK and the Coastal Powerhouse can bring forward, and really shove those new propositions down their pipelines to their clients they already have. And that's what we need. Otherwise, we're parochial and we're not international. And that's what we're trying to achieve, at least in terms of Ocean Futures in the Southwest. But we don't want to just limit it to that. I think the other thing that, when we think of free ports and we think of Southwest, Plymouth is the peanut, yeah, in comparison to Southampton and Portsmouth and the other larger ports. But we do have something that's on offer, which is a less congested water space to trial solutions for tomorrow, be that smart port, be that custom procedures and early interventions in terms of customs procedures, in terms of autonomy and all the other things that we've heard. But also it gives us an opportunity to pilot short sea shipping and clean propulsion in terms of commercial vessels. In terms of piloting, bringing in the core components to manufacturing into the likes of Southampton and bunkering it down to Plymouth and to other regional ports. So for us to regenerate our regional ports, to get our ports really pumping and optimized, the capacity, to give you an idea, Plymouth runs at around about 20–25% capacity, so it could have a lot more cargoes coming through it. But it also needs to enrich those cargoes. It can't be just the animal feeds and fuels aggregates, etc. It needs to be components to a manufacturing base, Plymouth, of which we already got strong manufacturing. We're going to obviously increase that with free port status. But we now need to make sure that the cargoes are coming in, not just because they got traditional routes, but we're going to try to get some fresh routes with rich cargo sets, bespoke almost to those the needs, but leveraging smaller vessels and leveraging effectively the clean propulsion of tomorrow as pilots and as then main forte going forward. So that's really what we're trying to do in the Southwest.
Richard, thank you so much. David, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, morning everyone. So no, it's great to hear from everyone this morning, and to hear from the Minister as well. And I think to give everyone a bit of a summary of what we're doing in Northern Ireland as part of the Belfast Maritime Consortium, and myself specifically with Artemis Technologies, we're really trying to build on a world-leading capability in hydrofoiling technology and lightweight composite manufacture within maritime to create a unique opportunity where we can anchor IP within the UK to deliver export-led growth and create high-value jobs locally. That's our ambition, that's our mission. And really create these enabling technologies that can really support and make a difference to decarbonise maritime. We're very early in our journey. We are a very new regional cluster, which has only been going 12 months or so. But we have big plans, we have big ambitions. I think a few of you would have been aware of our high-speed foiling ferry project, which is underway. We hope to launch that vessel in 2023. Ahead of that, we're going to be launching the world's most advanced fully electric foiling workboat in March, so 11-metre, 10-tonne platform, which is going to be hopefully a global story and really showcase what's possible when public-private partnerships come together and when industry, academia and public bodies come together as well. Within the Belfast Maritime Consortium itself, we have obviously Artemis leading in terms of maritime design, but we're working with other industries, other sectors, so the automotive sector with Creative Composites, we're working with the aerospace sector as well, Spirit Aerosystems, formerly Bombardier, to really see how we can utilise technologies and learnings from what's there already in Belfast and in Northern Ireland and use that to create these new opportunities within maritime. And, you know, maritime is so far behind automotive, so far behind aerospace, and there is an opportunity now, but I don't think we're winning it in the UK. You know, Harry mentioned it before, Norway, Singapore, all these places are investing so much money. They have products in market now and they're building on that knowledge already, and we've got a long way to catch up. And it's really important that sort of technology and innovation is driven by, you know, it's probably got to be driven by SMEs with support from government and support from academia as well. And then it's got to be industrialised by the larger companies. And I think that's the way we're going to move forward quickly and accelerate this sort of transition and this opportunity we have today.
David, thank you so much. I just had a quick text where I have to give you an update about Mersey Maritime very quickly from the sort of northwest, but I'll be very quick. I'm more interested in hearing names from our panelists actually, but obviously John, Mersey Maritime is good as well. We're kind of the old man as far as the cluster organisation is concerned. As I mentioned, we're 20 years old. We took the decision 10 years ago to be completely commercially sustainable whilst still remaining a not-for-profit. So we have some wonderful members. We have about 200 plus members. We have full-time staff there. And one of the reasons we're here today, because actually we wanted to give and learn as well. You know, actually the collaboration keeps coming through, and we've seen it with our cluster organisation where you have really externally heavily competing organisations. So, you know, the ports, well, 3 of the major ports are members. You know, we have the shipping lines are members, but actually when they come into Mersey Maritime, you know, you kind of leave your weapons at the door because we have a skills issue, we have a career situation, we need to decarb, we need to digitise, right? And you might have some solutions that they need, and et cetera, and you know, if we don't get hold of this thing, if we don't create, you know, a functioning ecosystem, you're right, we're going to lose the opportunity. Forget Liverpool or, you know, the region. We're going to lose an opportunity for UK PLC. So that's kind of where we're up to. Actually, David, are you in the final of our awards tomorrow?
Yeah, you told me we haven't won though already.
I don't know. Harry's tried to blackmail me earlier with some croissant, actually, but
I'm not sure I'm coming anymore.
Oh, yeah. You have to watch it live. It is live. live stream. So if I may, I'm just going to dig down a little bit. One of the things that we've noticed, so as I say, we've all sort of known each other, different guises over the last few years. And as we watch these cluster organisations develop and grow, it's always fascinating that it is not one size fits all. Every single organisation is slightly different because it represents the uniquenesses, of that particular region. I'm going to go probably to Stu first, if I may, because I know you are going through the sort of governance structure at the moment, which is interesting. We have to build the model we've seen up in Liverpool is you have to build a structure and a vehicle, to sort of service the ecosystem. What have you learned so far about that sort of journey? Because you're already managing director now, you're not of Maritime UK Solent.
I am, yeah. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's been a great journey. I mean, we started probably a couple of years ago. I mean, the Solent LEP, as I mentioned, maritime is so important to our economy that the board of the LEP said we've got to focus on maritime. There was a push from government and BAEs around supporting your strategic sectors, and without question, the Solent Maritime Cluster has a competitive and comparative advantage that sits on a global setting. So it's the one we have to back, and our board are absolutely behind that. So it wasn't too much of a stretch to think, actually, how do we sort of foster what exists in the Solent and sort of, and emulate what you've done up in the Northwest, really, and what others done. And I Team Humber as well have been one of in the vanguard. And it's great to see all these sort of regional clusters growing, and it's been great for us to be part of that journey. And we very recently we've incorporated Maritime UK Solent, it's a limited company. Amory here will be chairing that organisation. Graham as a board member, as our lead for maritime on our Solent LEP board. And I'll be managing director. It's wholly owned by the Solent Local Enterprise Partnership, but is absolutely industry led. And I think that's one of the things that came out of the earlier panel discussion. Okay, there was lots of asks of BAEs for money, and yes, but I think as you said, it's the money is a tight fiscal environment. So what is it that we can do for ourselves? And I think having industry led with all that expertise, the potential funding that does need sort of pump priming, let's not avoid that, is there. And let's harness that. And through Maritime UK Solent, I'm hoping and very, very confident the Solent will sort of get as much airtime as Mersey Maritime does, and we can sort of demonstrate that we really are a coastal powerhouse.
We're
coming for you.
Someone's popping out their managing director, aren't they? Oh my goodness.
Healthy competition.
It is. But on a serious note, this is actually what it's about, but we actually work together with Freeports. We actually got our LEPs together who didn't really know each other and said, well, actually, guys, what are you doing? What are we doing? How do we learn off each other? And we've seen numerous examples of this. It's really good to see.
You're absolutely right on that, Chris. Just on that point. I mean, we wanted to speak to someone at Liverpool City Region Freeport about the work we were doing and some of the challenges in relation to the Freeport agenda. I came to you. You put me in contact. We were on the phone within the same day, and it's having that network across the UK. And the 8 freeports that have been designated, we're absolutely thrilled to be one of those eight freeports. And we're not in competition anymore. No. We are all there, and we're all working collectively. So how can we learn from each other to make sure that this fantastic policy agenda for coastal communities really does deliver on those 3 objectives around trade and investment, around innovation hotbeds, and most importantly, the key priority around regeneration and jobs. And for us, as an LEP and Maritime UK Solent, that is the absolute driver, because we want those benefits from those tax sites, those custom sites to spread to the whole of the Solent economy and beyond, so that we really can make sure that policy does level up the UK.
No, absolutely. I'm just going to jump to Richard quickly, because Richard, you were talking about the triple helix. We call it the Holy Trinity, but it's the same thing, right? Academia, industry, government, local, and national, and different regions lean towards different bits of that particular tripod. Again, representing the different uniquenesses. So how have you found, obviously being a councillor, local politician, what was the point where you went, aha, okay, cluster organisation, this is going to work, local government, boom?
Well, when I came to Plymouth, it's my first ever outing as local authority. I've always been in the commercial sector until then, so it was an unusual experience. But within days, and as Kevin alluded to, we realised we have something, and we just got to bring it together. And one of the things that Robert Courts actually said to me the other day, he said, you know, one of my key things is I want a single voice. I want a unified voice. Yeah. And he also wanted to know about what are the regulations that need attention and help with. But those two things. And so for me, it was really a matter of just bringing those that already came together and making sure that they really did understand their role and commit to their role within the cluster. So I think that we were very fortunate that we had some strong universities already collaborating through those ERDF programs and partnering and having some shared assets in terms of testing facilities and so on. And also, you know, local government and LEPs always behind it. But what was really interesting is that, you know, you've got some key primes within the Southwest who, you know, have brought their innovation apparatus to the Southwest from elsewhere. And are doing what Kevin mentioned, which is doing their prototyping and piloting, etc. And so that naturally gave some oxygen to what we wanted to do. But I think it's only a tip of an iceberg, and we now have a chance to ramp that up. And it's not just a matter of using UK primes, it's now looking across internationally, especially with that free port status, to bring in some of those players to come together themselves in terms of opportunities. So I think that the focus has to be now on industry. It really has to be in terms of how do they create the necessary partnerships, leveraging what we've effectively offered up. And so I think we've probably been stronger in the research and the academia and government. And our intent is to be now strengthening and bringing on further the industry players. So it's a call to industry, really. To say, come and leverage what's been put together.
Well, and this segues very, very nicely in back to Graham, your industry. And again, this is what's really interesting about the panel. We have the Holy Trinity here, you know. So industry, Red Funnel, why involved?
Why are we involved?
Yeah.
Well, we're involved for a number of reasons. We're involved because we fundamentally believe that the environmental benefits that come from a strong maritime base, not only within the Solent but within the UK, will be a major player, a major contributing factor for the economic development of the region and the nation. We think that is fundamentally key. We're in it because, as I said earlier on, we're in a retonnaging exercise, and we need to identify how we power our new fleet. We've talked about Whitelink and their hybrid ferry. It's okay, I didn't say anything.
Well, I think David's got some options here.
Yeah, no,
and
the foiling is a fascinating piece, and that's a kind of a really interesting piece for us. But I think the industry element of it is driven, or it's not driven, comes from trying to understand how we can aid and support some of the great things that are happening in our cluster, in yours, in the Southwest. But industry needs some support, not only from the other elements of the Trinity, and you know, not to hark back to government, but we also need some active involvement and support from government, and not just financial. But I think it's more than just a Trinity. I think we need to add another foot to the stool, really.
Oh, it's going to be complicated already. I can only count to three. That's in front of my hand.
Chris, can I come back in?
Of course.
We mentioned skills, Stuart, and I think when I think of Freeport and us implementing Freeports with gusto and with the necessary impact, it's always going to be about the skills. If we bring on, you know, in your case, 50,000, for us it's around 10,000 jobs. We already have a shortage of skills in the Southwest, even without the Freeport. And so it's all going to be about bringing on those skills, understanding what the requirement is for skills and the demand, what are the gaps, and really having a proper soldiered plan over the next 3-5 years, but also even longer term than that. And again, that's where industry really needs to come forward to say, these are really the skills that we need for today and tomorrow and the different horizons. Because we can invest money, we can invest all these other things, but actually if we don't get those brought on properly, those skills brought on at all stages and levels, then I don't think we'll achieve the sort of aspirations we've got.
I saw you nodding a little bit there, David.
Yeah, I think Richard, you're spot on. Absolutely. And I think it's something that we found, and it's something we were very aware of, that the skills don't necessarily exist, particularly in Northern Ireland, but don't really exist necessarily in the UK as well, for us to accelerate the growth that we need. So one of the members of our consortium at Belfast Met College, so we worked incredibly fast to put together a new syllabus. So we have 6 new apprentices starting, our first ever apprentices at Artemis, working on composite manufacturing for maritime, but also high voltage battery systems. So it's kind of the start of that process to develop these skills. And we're working to collaborate with other regions and other partners as well. And the Maritime Skills Commission, we've been in heavy discussions with them. But it's something we're very aware of. And if we're successful and our technology is utilised around the UK and around the world, then we're going to need those skills to service and repair and fix these vessels and to install them all over the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, just to follow on to that, yeah, couldn't agree more, Richard. And just a couple of things that we're doing in the Solent, and I think it's where everything can come together, because certainly your local LEP will be sort of have a skills action plan, for example, and a local skills report. We're going to have a specific element of that in the Solent that focuses in on maritime skills and sort of map that need, getting employers at the front and centre of that for the skills they need today, but also tomorrow. Within our Freeport and our proposition there is a Green Growth Institute as well, so that we can make sure that green maritime element, so we have those green entrepreneurs and engineers of the future, that are local communities. And let's not forget our tax sites are specifically located where they are, because they are next to areas of deprivation and some real skills and some real sort of youth unemployment challenges. So we want those people to benefit in the long term from the Freeport legacy as well. With my other hat on, so Local Enterprise Partnership, we've invested local growth on, Anne-Marie talked about previously, in some college sites which are employer-led, so CCAM on the Isle of Wight, Seamast in firms, industry-led, with the skills that industry need, industry in there training young people. They're coming from all over the Solent and further afield to benefit from that training. And we're also in the Institute of Technology game as well. We're through to the next stage of that, and hopeful and that will be absolutely focused on maritime. Maritime is the lead if we're successful in that. So yeah, lots of things we're doing locally.
And again, you're far stronger at that than we are. Liverpool in the Northwest, far stronger. I'm looking to John. Yeah, we often chat enviously about the stuff that's happening, especially with the relationship with local government driving, with Solent or Plymouth, certainly down there. Kevin.
Yeah, Chris, I was going to say on the skills piece, it's quite a complicated one, because it requires higher education universities to work with FE for further education as well, because we as universities have got to realise that we're providing graduate master's level courses which are appropriate for some skills needs, but unless we effectively join up with further education, and it goes further than that as well, because we've got this ongoing issue of attracting the right people into the industry in the first place. So you actually have to go right back to the schools, schools at sort of 14 and 15, and say, look, if you want a good, exciting, well-paid career, think about marine, think about maritime, think about the opportunities within that. So it starts to get young people to think about this. And, we need to be more diverse in our sector. Currently it's very male dominated. We need to reach out. We need to get more female inclusion in this sector. Floating wind is certainly going for 33% female inclusion target on engineering, which is refreshing. The other thing on what a lot of universities are doing, and what we're doing at Plymouth, what a lot of universities are doing, are making their courses available part-time to existing company employees. A lot of companies, well, all companies, paying into the apprenticeship levy, and the master's programs are now often accessible as a higher degree apprenticeship, which means that companies can send an existing employee on a course 1 day a week, and it's not actually costing them anything because it's already paid for what they've paid into the apprenticeship levy. So my point was really, we've all got to come together. A lot of the discussion here is really around complementarity. So, you know, what we're doing in the Southwest, how does that complement what's going on in Mersey? How does that complement what's going on in Surrey? We've all got our strengths. How do we bring that together? And it's not just in that research sphere, it's in the skills development piece as well.
No, absolutely. We could do this all day, couldn't we? I mean, I'm getting shouted at now at the back. I actually think we need to have another one of these events, Simon and Ben, quite soon, because actually it's fantastic. You know, I love hearing about everything which is happening throughout the UK. Fantastic panel. Again, we could keep talking forever, but thank you so much for sharing everything which is going on in your particular regions. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon. So please, thank you. We could give a panel round of applause. Right, so we now move to the last bit of this morning's, just moving into the afternoon's event, where we'll be showcasing a video on Scotland and North East, Humber, East Anglia and the South East. So I'd like to invite our panellists up here, please, for this segment. Thank you. And while they're making their way, we could possibly pop the video on. Thank you, Simon.
Scotland is a true global powerhouse in the maritime sector. Perhaps that's not surprising given the 7,000 miles of coastline. No one in Scotland is more than 50 miles away from the sea, and that's inspired people through the ages to engage with the sea and use it to develop their livelihoods and the proposition that Scotland offers. And that proposition includes some of the world's most significant ship management companies. It's the largest ship management cluster we have in the UK. We have a large professional services cluster beyond that too. We have shipbuilding happening on the Clyde and at Rosyth for the Royal Navy. You've got a huge offshore support industry, oil and gas originally, but increasingly transitioning to greener and more sustainable types of energy development. And you've got training colleges and universities that are at the cutting edge of not only what modern skills training looks like, but what innovation needs to look like, and that bridge between industry and academia. And some of the most exciting innovation is happening in Scotland today. We've seen quite a lot of investment by ports, making sure that they can capitalise on the offshore developing market that you have. An example of that, Aberdeen Harbour is investing £350 million to capitalise on offshore renewables. To Port of Cromarty Firth, £50 million, and that's repeated around the coast to make sure that the Scottish maritime sector is there to benefit from that work that is due to come as we move to a greener future. You've also got the Type 26 being built by BAE, and you've got Babcock working with the University of Strathclyde on some really exciting new partnerships around innovation. And that at Strathclyde is further boosted by the establishment of Maritime Research and Innovation UK, which is the UK's collaborative flagship research and innovation body for maritime. And that's happening in Scotland, but it brings the rest of the sector together. There's a lot of focus on hydrogen across the sector around the world, but there's some really important steps being taken in Orkney and across Scotland with the High Seas 3 consortium that is taking a practical application of that technology and looking at what that means in terms of ferries and getting it into use, because it's incredibly important that we make the progress we need to sooner rather than later. That's something we're all committed to doing. Humber is a really significant region in the UK. I think just under a quarter of all maritime trade that comes into England goes through those Humber ports. But it's not just about trade, it's also about ports and other parts of the sector hosting other industries, and that is why the region has been positioned as the UK's energy estuary, particularly servicing those offshore wind developments. Around 35,000 jobs in the region are dependent on maritime, and it makes a significant contribution to the economy, creating jobs throughout the rest of the supply chain. So there's some really exciting projects in the Humber, and one of those is Green Port Hull. It's a partnership between ABP and Siemens to make sure that as much of the value as possible from offshore wind is occurring in our coastal areas, and that is a £310 million investment for turbine manufacturing, testing, assembly and operations. So that's a massive project. And the South Humber Bank project, which is a £42 million investment with Able Marine, is about how we can ensure the port has the infrastructure needed to service that offshore wind market. So another significant investment there. The Humber was one of the first free ports to be announced by the Chancellor, and the Humber free port is focused on decarbonisation, and it's striking that around a quarter of all energy produced in the UK is produced within that Humber estuary. So it's really significant, and the free port is designed to accelerate that and ensure we pave the way to that greener future. And we've got the development of the Hornsey 2 offshore wind project next to Hornsey 1, the world's largest offshore wind project, and we want to see that creating jobs in manufacturing, operations and maintenance and other servicing from Humber, and that's very much at the heart of the free port bid. Well, Freeport East was one of the first free ports to be announced by the Chancellor as his flagship economic strategy for how we grow the economies in coastal areas. And Freeport East has a particular focus on hydrogen, how we link the decarbonisation of our economy with coastal development. It's a really important one for this part of the country. And the Freeport that was being successful in its bid is due to create 13,500 jobs, unlock in the short term £500 million of investment, due to create a total impact of £5.5 billion, which is clearly the most significant infrastructure and economic development announcement and package for the East Coast that we've seen in a very long time. Well, maritime is big business in East Anglia. You've got a huge coastline, and that creates lots of opportunities. And you've got the Broads National Park as well, where you've got boat builders and people getting on the water and enjoying the recreational health benefits of that. And you've got some world-class boat builders, International Boat Building College at Alton Broad. You've got a huge shoreside support infrastructure for offshore wind that's really growing. Places like Yarmouth and Lowestoft playing a big role there. And you've got Felixstowe, the UK's largest container port, clearly a massive driver of economic growth. And you've got offshore engineering firms, and in particular, you've got world-class marine science at Lowestoft in the form of CFAS, that new state-of-the-art facility, which is generally world-leading. Clearly, with the Prime Minister's ambition on offshore wind, this region stands to benefit significantly, but it needs to develop that properly and capitalise on the opportunities that we see there. There's opportunities around shipbuilding for the East Coast, servicing those offshore wind farms in particular. And there's also some really interesting work around how we digitise what's happening in some of our ports. And I know a lot of colleagues around the East Coast are looking at how we bring some of the digitisation technologies and processes to make the movement of freight even more efficient. And that's something that it's great to see this part of the country leading on. In the southeast, 2 million people, which is half of the total people in that region, live in coastal towns and cities. So it's a really important sector. How we grow maritime is going to be really important to the future prosperity of the region. And it's a region that encompasses all parts of the maritime sector. You've got lots of people in leisure marine who are enjoying inland waterways and enjoying the coastal areas. You've also got major ports. You've got ports of the Thames, and you've got Dover, clearly a massively important trade route to the continent in particular. And you've got really exciting developments across all parts of those. The South East has two of the first wave of free ports that the Chancellor has announced, and they're going to create thousands of jobs across the region. If you look at Free Ports East, they're forecasting 13,500 new jobs, and the Thames Free Port, 25,000. So really significant development for the region.
Fantastic, and that was a fantastic video actually. Well done, Ben. He's here. No, he's obviously gone somewhere in his high-vis hat and his high-vis jacket. I'm actually going to ask David, if I could also have one as well from I'm feeling quite jealous.
Delighted by the brand.
I was going to say we see that. So, well, we're delighted to introduce our sort of final panel of today. David Williams, on behalf of ADP, will give us an update on what's happening on the Humber. We have Douglas Lang, who will be giving us an update on everything north of the border in Scotland, and of course Simon Barnes from the University of Kent. So, David, if I could come to you, what's happening on the Humber? I know we're visiting you in a few weeks, I think.
Could well
Team Humber, I think we are. Yeah. We're popping over there.
Could well be. We're taking visitors all the time, so you're very
Fantastic.
welcome.
No,
we'll even let people from the Mersey in too, so it's good. So I'm really struck by the term coastal powerhouse, because I think that's apt for all of the areas that we've been talking about, but I think it's particularly apt for the Humber. As you heard on the video there, it's nearly a quarter of all of the UK's maritime trade comes through the Humber. Already, it's around about 17% of the total of UK's trade. That's around 35,000 shipping movements every year in the Humber. So it's a pretty busy part of the maritime world, with over 40,000 jobs that are directly reliant on what goes on in the Humber ports. And what I'm really struck by is that more than half of those are not in the Humber. They're in places like West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. They're stretching into the Midlands and all across to Manchester. The interrelation between the economies is really interesting. And when we talk and have conferences like this and events like this, where we talk about the coastal areas and the need to regenerate them, it's not just a selfish plea for the people who are in those areas. It has a direct impact on the whole of the UK economy, and the Humber is a place where I think that's particularly relevant. And I'm also struck by the downside of some of that. In the Humber, we have some of the most deprived communities that you'll find anywhere in the UK, in places like Grimsby and Scunthorpe and in Hull, in Goole as well. So clearly there is a lot more that can be done to tap into the potential of those areas, the skills base of those areas, the workforce of those areas to bring more. So potential is probably the theme I want to talk about from the Humber. Yes, as it's been mentioned, we're one of the Freeport areas that have been designated. We're really confident and ambitious that we will be one of the first ones that's up and running. We hope in the autumn, but obviously we wait to hear what the government are going to say for their announcement. That's quite an impressive collaboration and partnership that's come together, including all of our local authorities, our two LEPs, the universities, and a whole batch of different private businesses. There's a coalition of the willing that we think will be transformative in terms of delivering jobs in the area. But as you also heard on the video, we are very much at the heart of the offshore wind development. So the Greenport Hull development joint project between Siemens and ABP is involved in the manufacture of wind blades, but across the water in Grimsby, the biggest global hub for the operations and maintenance of the offshore wind sector is based in the Port of Grimsby, and it's growing all the time. The bad news is that the Humber is the biggest carbon polluting part of the UK by quite some margin. The good news that follows from that is we're also the best potential for looking at decarbonising our economy as trailblazers, and that's what's very much the heart of our Freeport bid, is all based around decarbonisation and how we can show the way for others to follow. It has been touched on in earlier discussions, but I do want to pick up on one small theme as well. For us, transport connectivity is a really important message and one we want to take away. And Tim certainly touched on that when he spoke earlier. And I think it's particularly important to us. 3,500 lorries a day just from the Port of Birmingham come in and out of that port. It's something like every 6 seconds a lorry moves through the Port of Birmingham. We would like to get more of those onto rail, and that needs government more than anything else to treat rail freight as a priority, and it needs investment in our rail infrastructure to make that a reality. So that's probably enough for me, and I'll talk more.
Just to digress very quickly, in fact, I'll do this at the end, but last shipping week, 2 years ago, we had the East-West connectivity event with, yeah, absolutely. And it's so important. It's so important. Douglas, welcome.
Thank you.
Please tell us what's happening in the Scottish Maritime Cluster.
Well, I'm going to talk very quietly because what we're doing in Scotland is secret. In Scotland, we don't know ourselves. In the rest of the country, we certainly don't know, and the rest of the world doesn't know an awful lot about it either. So coming third, fourth, fifth in line. Most of what has been said before chimes very, very precisely with what is going on in Scotland. So there isn't an awful lot to add there. I will give you a little bit of a background to the Scottish cluster. This is our third London International Shipping Week. And we started, I think, the March before that, the London International Shipping Week. We had a visit from Geoffrey Mount Evans. And regularly we do have visitors from the Lord Mayor of London. And typically we give him a cup of tea and send him on his way because very few are actually interested in maritime. Geoffrey Mount Evans, obviously from Clarkson, was mustard keen on maritime and wanted to meet maritime businesses. And he asked me to bring some friends and colleagues along, and I thought, friends and colleagues from maritime, we don't talk to each other, so it was a bit of an ask. Anyway, I did that and laid on a fairly liquid lunch for him. And lo and behold, all these strangers who live in the same community started talking to each other. Geoffrey discreetly left, and 2 hours later, these people were still talking. And that was the beginning of the Scottish Maritime Cluster. We had, on many, many occasions before that, not me personally, but other people, tried to form a cluster. They recognised the benefits of the industry in Scotland, or even in the central belt, the conurbation between Glasgow and Edinburgh, where 80% of the industry is based. Actually talking to each other and seeing what we could do. This time, timing maybe, I don't know. It took off, and since then we have grown a substantial membership of something like 45 of the main maritime companies within Scotland. And similar to other regions, we have the Royal Navy, we have the Babcocks, we have the BA Systems, we have the ferry operators. Somewhat unique to us, we have the ship management community, and then we have the colleges, and we have the universities. So we do have that diverse spread. We also have a large problem in the geography of Scotland. We have our most northern member is Orkney, the hydrogen project. And then the majority of our members are actually in the central belt conurbation, not unsurprisingly. So contact, which is the fundamental of any cluster, is often quite difficult. I suppose the last 18 months, if anything has been beneficial, it has been the outreach that we have actually managed to achieve through workshops and meetings. However, our ambition is beyond maritime. I come from an R&D background in offshore, and I spent 10, 15 years in Norway learning that trade. So everything that is being said about the international community chimes with me. And what we have been focusing on, because we think we have the core maritime businesses, but now we're looking at the outreach to touch the other industries in Scotland. Now, we think that maritime and shipping are secret organisations. In Scotland, we have in Dundee the world-leading games industry. Now, games and digitalisation are one and the same thing. And we have DP officers on our sophisticated dive support vessels who are Game Boys. The technology is so similar, and when we started talking to the gaming industry, who are looking for new avenues for their technology, they say, maybe maritime is something that we can get into. And we're finding that time and time again. Other industries have products that they are running out of market for and need to look somewhere else. And maritime is a big receptor of a lot of that technology. So we're spending quite a lot of time trying to get in touch with them. As a trivial example, we had a workshop recently where one of our small members, he specializes in luxury, not yachts, but tenders. And he had to go to Italy for the upholstery. He had to go to Germany for the power chain. And he had to build, I think he built in Italy as well. And during that forum, he was introduced to technology that would have given him a market-leading power chain. He would have been introduced to a company that would have done his upholstery for a fraction of the price, all based in Scotland, all within his reach. And that kind of, for me, summarized the challenge we have. One, we have to make people aware of what we can offer. We need to make people aware of what they can bring in to maritime. But we cannot do it as long as we remain as shy as we are. I was talking recently in a dinner in Glasgow, so obviously it was 2 years ago. And the term I used was gallus, which is a very Scottish expression. It means that we need a little bit more swagger. And I don't know how that translates into English, but swagger is also a good word. We sit in these rooms and we tell each other how wonderful we are, but outside of the room, nobody really knows or cares that much. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And gallus is the way you go about things, not what you say. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, have you got some swagger, Simon?
Not
You
sure
said
about
you're a very
that.
well-dressed academic.
Well, yes. Well, thank you first for inviting me here today, Chris. It's good to see you all in person. So, yes, a little bit about the southeast and what we're doing really, and just to focus that the southeast, Kent and Essex, probably represents something between 15 and 20% of the UK maritime economy, and the importance of the Thames as a river literally outside our door, and the opportunity to connect that Thames to the international community through IMO and much more widely across to Europe. We shouldn't forget our European colleagues, and we're really pleased as a university that the government's funding Horizon Europe for us to invest in that and the partnerships we have. In terms of what's happening in London and the Thames Estuary Growth Board, I think, doing some really exciting ideas on investment in clean and hydrogen technology in the river, and talking particularly to investors looking to set up some living labs for hydrogen technology in the region. Very much an investor-led program. They've taken the view that we need to get investors' confidence, and we've talked about this today, haven't we? And how do we get investors' confidence in some of our ideas and technologies to put money into them? So that's an exciting project. Yesterday, 3 clean maritime projects based on the Thames, looking at how to use the river to transport product and waste. The river is a major way of moving waste around and resources, and how to do that cleanly. Ourselves as a university was successful with a project with the Port of Dover and P&O to look at how we electrify ferries. That's really good news. And I think the exciting thing about that is working with Warwick Manufacturing Group to use the 300 people who are currently working on automotive technology to understand how can we apply that to ferries and that. So that's going to be an exciting thing to do. The other area is supply chains, and we're all seeing how supply chains are struggling at the moment, and some of the challenges we have around supply chain, and that's physical challenges of moving boxes around the world. Of course it is, but it's also the digital challenges of actually moving the information around at the same time as the boxes or the trucks or the lorries. And what we're trying to do with partners, including the Connected Places Catapult and the Digital Catapult, how do we in real time link the product, the person and the place together so that we can get to actually a digital trading system that works? And that requires the thinking around the university in terms of biometrics, identification and digital to work out how we achieve that integration of maritime and digital. So I think that's a really important area. The last area, and we really we have a concern, and we have, like many coastal areas, if we heard from earlier, the deprivation, and how do we actually do things for health? how do we start to understand how we can link health data? This is an area where we've got so much data, we don't know what to do with it. So how can we link the health data to some of the social data to not make these coastal communities the end of the world and somewhere people will want to stay and actually spend their time in once they've grown up and they've learned there. So that's a really important work that we're doing as a university. And the other important area again is talking about culture and the arts and our history. Our maritime history brings people to the coast. They go to the Mary Rose in Portsmouth. They go to the maritime environment in Dundee and places all around the coast, and they spend money. And so how do we actually make that again more accessible and more attractive to young people to engage in that digital community attached to the heritage and the history? A couple of challenges, I think, is skills. We've talked about that, the skills requirements. We know that energy infrastructure is going to be a real challenge to get green maritime and the green economy. We know the grid won't cope, and we know that we need investment there. And then the last area again, I think, with a real challenge for our academic colleagues is around this use of the oceans as both a food source and a resources source. We see that off the south coast where we dredge up large amounts of the seabed. We need that for our aggregates industry in London. But what does that mean for biodiversity and future food production? And how do we link all of that together? And as academics, we really need to start working on some of these challenges of the future, as seeing the seas as a resource, but a sustainable resource.
I think it's really interesting because there's some very similar themes coming out, but also there's some really interesting potential solutions. So this will chime with everyone here. So in Liverpool, we have fourth generation employed. So we have kids whose mum and dad didn't work, whose mum and dad didn't work, whose mum and dad didn't work. Same, yeah, coastal communities, so we do. And it's a real problem because actually they're not actually part of our community. They don't understand. I'm not even talking about maritime community, I'm saying community normally. They don't understand that. Well, you work hard, you get a job, you get a mortgage, you pay your tax, it pays for the NHS, it pays for schools. They just don't understand. And maritime has an absolute responsibility for this because this is in our backyard. This is some of the things that we have to sort of deal with. I'm really interested, Douglas, if I may, to tease out a little bit more of the digital gaming platform and how that translates, because we all know youngsters, they're just whiz kids, aren't they? Absolute whiz kids on these sort of things. And how do you see that? How do you see that happening?
I mean, the software that is used on board vessels at the moment for positioning systems comes straight out of the gaming industry. The gaming industry has actually far more sophisticated models. And when we start looking at autonomous vessels, many of the solutions that we need for visualization, for LiDAR systems, it already exists in that technology. They're using it in their augmented reality systems already. And indeed, we as a company are already taking them on board in the shape of sort of the HAL lenses for doing remote inspection of vessels. And that technology didn't come from maritime, it didn't come from any other industry other than the gaming industry.
And obviously I'm just jumping on a little bit and I'm probably going to put this over to ABP over there. Obviously, with the more native population, i.e. the youngsters, because that's what they call native technologists, isn't it? It's youngsters. It's not like you and I that probably may have the Commodore 64, had to load the tape in, and you'd play, I don't know, dinosaurs or something. I'm still up there actually. I got to level 6 last night. But ABP, huge employer, huge driver of growth. Digital technology, what are you doing there? Or perhaps using digital technology to attract youngsters into the industry from some of these really hard to reach communities?
It was an Atari ST for me, actually.
Oh, was it?
But I think actually it starts more basic than that. And the point you make about sort of third, fourth generation of people families that are unemployed, I think is a point very well made. That's certainly what we are aware of in some of the communities around the Humber. And I think it's far more basic than the technology thing. I think you have to step back a bit further than that. And I think there is a responsibility for those of us who are big in the maritime sector in those communities is to do a lot of outreach work. Because what we are aware of, and certainly talking to a number of the secondary schools in the area, we don't simply have poverty, and it's not a poverty of ambition, it's poverty of awareness. So for certainly in Grimsby, a couple of the schools that we're working with at the moment, what they will tell you is across the board, but particularly among girls, there is a real lack of awareness about what they may be able to do in careers in the future. If they are in third and fourth generation families, the world of work's never touched their lives. They have seen girls be hairdressers, or they've seen them be nurses, and those are vaguely things they can point to as a potential career path. Maritime sector does not feature into that at all. So we are looking at ways, and we've started doing this as a programme, of having different kinds of work experience working with schools in local areas around, instead of getting a kid to spend a week with us doing the photocopying and making cups of tea, actually coming and spending over a period of several weeks, half a day on the quayside, half a day with our engineering team, half a day with our IT team, talking about digital work, half a day with our communications team, etc. Trying just to expose them to the types of work that are out there. And I think that's one of the ways that we can work as a sector far more effectively with our local schools right at the early point to get them aware of what's out there before they think about anything else, and think about the maritime sector as part of that. And then once you've got through those kind of conversations, the digitalised conversation, etc., is the next step. But we have to go far more basic at the beginning.
I'm going to actually move this question on about university. Well, you're an academic on the panel. University, how do you, in fact, all teachers, all academics, it's a really good point, because often youngsters are in school and they're being taught by teachers who don't really understand what maritime is. We have a number of maritime ambassadors, and one report came back that she went into a primary school and she was saying, well, actually, 95% of traded goods come on a boat to the UK. And the teacher said, no, it doesn't. It comes on a plane. And she went, no, it doesn't. And the teacher said, no, it does. It comes on a big 747. There's big jumbos, you can see it. And it's often a problem where, we're looking at youngsters in school. We have digital technology, which they will be more naturally persuaded to come into our industry for. We need the tech anyway. University of Kent, what interesting things are you involved in? And I suppose this also with your Maritime UK South East sort of representative hat on as well.
Thanks, Chris. I think one of the things we all are aware of is the awareness of young people of the environment and sustainability. I think the net zero agenda to them is particularly important. It's the future of the planet. So that there's a huge environmental awareness we find with our students and concern, and it's really how do we capture that environmental concern and awareness and relate that to the oceans and the maritime sector, and say, as we heard today, that actually 2/3 of the world is water, and the impact that we have on that the environment and how we respond to net zero, it's absolutely there. That they also love numbers, and they really love, they're so digitally connected, and understanding how to write algorithms, machine learning, all of these attributes to improve the performance, the productivity of some of our engineering, looking at how we can understand new emerging areas of technology like synthetic biology is a really exciting area that has potential to change the way we handle some of our substances and materials. So I think I'm positive. The young generation are very excited. Digital means a lot to them, and so does the environment. I think we have to relate that to maritime and the coastal community, so that when they've been to college in Hull or Liverpool, they stay there and they don't necessarily, dare I say it, gravitate to London to do a job crunching numbers for a financial organisation.
Because Harry would have thrown us out, I think.
No, I think he knows what I mean. It's about knowledge. It's the hierarchy: data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And it's that applies to to any sector, and try and encourage people to use that data to further their knowledge and their wisdom is across every single sector. I think that's what I'd say. And no, London is hugely important.
So, and again, this segues very nicely into one of Douglas's points, which is actually maritime is a secret in Scotland. I suspect it isn't just Scotland, right? It's everywhere. So, people in Liverpool, they don't know what the big red cranes do. They do something, don't know. Fine, okay. So how do we then, as coastal communities, and I'm just opening this up to the panel, how do we how do we challenge ourselves to better connect, better message, better do something? As opposed to just doing it independently, what can we all do? Through Maritime UK, we can put asks into government. What can we do? There were 3 asks to better, connect with our local communities and actually showcase how important maritime is and the opportunities that are there. How would we do that? And David, I'm going to come to you first because I suspect you already have 20 asks already.
I do. I was dreading you were going to come to me first. If I knew the answer, I think I'd be quite wealthy. But I do think the answer is collective. I think that is the absolute point. My colleague Simon Bird, the director for the Humber Ports, often moans at me that he gets into a cab in London and they've never heard of Immingham. My challenge back would be, why would they? But that's not the point, because it's much closer to home. We have that issue. Go into the community in Immingham, and a lot of them may not have heard of the port sector, or at least they've heard of the port sector, but no idea how it relates to their lives. And I do think we as an industry together need to shout more about it. And I think events like this are useful, but it does also start, I think the challenge that I heard earlier, I thought, to government was a really good point. It starts with government recognising the importance of the sector as well, because they attending these events and saying it's great, it needs to then be followed through in the everyday workings of government working together with the industry collectively. And that for me is a big part of that. It's not simply about individual port operators or maritime organisations. It's not about us as a collective or as a whole, it's the government as well working together.
Douglas, what would your asks be of, a magic whiteboard, 2 or 3 asks to better showcase this incredible maritime?
Just before I answer, or try and answer that, there is one thing. There are a lot of jobs in maritime which are common to lots of other areas, and that is important to recognise as well. People, an accountant they can come in at all levels in all industries, and just because they're in maritime, they get absorbed into that industry. And it's really it's a question of us, first of all, attracting these people into our businesses, and then they become, as our engineers rightly said, marinated. Yeah, back to the point. I can remember a number of years ago, the Chamber of Shipping had a conference, and they were talking about this very subject. How do we promote the image and get it into the wider public? And I did comment, firmly tongue-in-cheek, I do say, that if you look at the maritime communities around the world, Norway, Singapore, Taiwan, what stood out in their communities was there was a rogue there. There was a rogue who had a profile, a shipping rogue. And I say that in the nicest possible way, but they were entrepreneurs and they were grander than life. And people recognized them and knew them, and they were tolerant of some of the things they do. Nowadays, we're far less tolerant, businesses are far less tolerant, and they won't accept that. But if you want to get yourself recognized in the pop world, you wreck a hotel room. I'm not advocating this, but we do need bigger personalities who are willing to stand up and actually promote the industry. This innate shyness is really doing us a disservice. I don't know where it comes from, but it is doing us a disservice. And I'll say it again, because that's the takeaway from this.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, we need to be a bit more gallus.
I like that. We need a swaggering rogue. Or we can, yeah, John, we can do this.
Love it. But you have a lot of swaggers.
Well, no, I don't think so. I must have to do Michael Bibby, maybe. We could dust him off. No, I absolutely think you're right. We don't shout about it enough. We don't. People think maritime is something in the 70s. It's dirty. It's, that is a part of it, of course, heavy engineering, but, loading stevedores. But I hope it's incredibly sophisticated and dynamic. If I may, Sam, ask you just to sum up and close up with your magic ideas on how you'd sort it all out. I'm getting shouted at the back for time.
Well, it's a very diverse sector, isn't it? It includes so many different aspects around ships, ports, but the diversity of the industry has always, I think, in the past been a challenge. Because it's been very different to say, invest in us, we'll make cars in Britain, or invest in us and we'll do stuff, because of the diversity of the sector. I think Maritime UK is doing a brilliant job in actually explaining that diversity as a benefit. And I think that is what we need to do to get to hit home, is actually the diversity of the sector. If it's done right, if it's done properly, does allow you to have a very effective investment strategy. If you get universities, business, and local authorities working together to recognise that diversity as a strength, then your investment becomes so much more solid and sound. And so I think the diversity also attracts young people. It allows them to bring skills that they don't necessarily associate with maritime into the sector, digital skills around other fields. So I think, the Coastal Powerhouse is, I'm hearing it more and more, it's definitely becoming a phrase that is being recognised and realised, certainly within Kent by the local authorities, that's for sure. And so, respect that diversity and see it as a strength, not as a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you to our other panellists. Again, it's one of these conversations that it will just keep going on and on and on, and it's in a really positive, constructive way. So again, I think we should have another one of these events fairly soon. So again, thank you. So please, a round of applause. So now, just for the closing address from actually one of our local MPs, Mike Kane, who is Shadow Shipping Minister.
I'm Mike Kane, I'm the Shadow Maritime Minister, and it's my great honour to be addressing the conference today around coastal communities. Martin Luther King said the strongest storms make the best sailors, but in addition to that, he said the biggest challenges make the best leaders. And the maritime industry has stepped up through the challenge of COVID, delivering the goods and services to our country. 95% of everything we bring in comes through the maritime sector, and the leadership that the sector has shown has been immense. And it's those two themes I just want to develop about leadership and challenge, about how we improve our coastal communities, some of the most neglected parts of our nation. Maritime UK have been working so hard through these clusters to bring agglomeration to our coastal communities of innovative and traditional businesses, making sure that there are opportunities for young people to train and develop and go on to have some great jobs in the industry. I recently visited Hull Port, and as I cycled past the Siemens factory with the wind turbines, I was blown away by the investment that has gone on there. It's bringing high-skilled jobs and regenerating that community. I recently also visited Wirral Waters to see with Peel Holdings and Mersey Maritime those fantastic projects they're bringing there to regenerate those dock areas and providing the opportunities again for young people to show that maritime is a vital industry with a great future and great prospects for people to work in it. And I think we have to work harder, further, faster to keep up this momentum that we are currently achieving. And I will be there with you as the Shadow Maritime Minister for anything I can do to assist you in creating the leaders of the future and levelling up our coastal communities.
Fantastic. So this almost brings today to a close. We've had some fantastic conversations. We've heard some really good panelists. We've launched a fantastic Coastal Powerhouse Manifesto. And a takeaway certainly for me is we can't just do this every 2 years. We have the capability and the capacity to do this far more regularly. And actually, this is what Maritime UK has been. This has been the biggest success for me about Maritime UK. The focus on our coastal communities and how we can work better together. I'd just like to say a few thank yous, of course, to Norton Rose Fulbright for hosting us today in this fabulous facilities, even sorted the sun out. The Maritime UK team, who as always are absolutely bomb-proof and diligent, no matter how big the hangover or how much they've drunk, are like absolute machines. We'd like to thank obviously Tim from UKMPG and Richard from BPA for helping us develop this manifesto. And of course, the Local Government Association, their Coastal SIG again, who've been part of creating this document moving forward. And of course, to all of our regions who are very kind enough to share some of the things that are going on in their particular areas, their strengths, their weaknesses in this very sort of show and tell event. So again, for my personal call to action is, don't be a stranger on this journey. This isn't about regions doing things by themselves. The only way we're going to truly be able to compete and showcase and drive this incredible industry is by working together. So again, if you have any issues, let me know as your sort of Maritime UK Coastals guy. We've got a few coastal bods here from Maritime UK, but we're here to help. That's our job. So I think we have a little more tea and coffee next door. So again, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of London Shipping Week.